Hey everyone, thanks so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
What if Monkey D. Luffy's journey to become king of the pirates was never forgotten? Given a Den Den Mushi that records everything, from his first steps out to sea with Kobe to the moment his crew begins to take shape, Luffy unknowingly leaves behind a living chronicle of laughter, danger, dreams, and unbreakable bonds. Told through humor-filled adventures and heartfelt moments, this story follows Luffy from the very beginning, capturing the memories he makes, the friends he gains, and the legend he slowly becomes. A long-form, character-driven retelling of One Piece that celebrates friendship, freedom, and the road to the Pirate King. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Memories by Keke XP. Respect to author.
Chapter 21, To the Grand Line we go. Well, that was shocking, Zoro muttered as he and Moshi made their way through the busy streets of Logatown. That girl looks way too much like Kuina, not only that, but she's a swordsman as well. Well, it is a big world after all. At least I won't run into her anymore. But damn it, that was a huge surprise. Zoro sighed and walked inside of the shop he had been looking for, the arms shop. I'm here to purchase a sword, Zoro called as he walked into the shop. Oh yes yes. A short man with strangely styled black hair and a nose that seemed red sat behind a desk with a smile on his face. Come right in, sir. Please feel free to look around as much as you want. We've got antique swords, new swords, and the latest swords in fashion. After all, this is a well-established store that has been in business for 200 years. I've got 100,000 berries. Zoro slammed the money onto the desk. Give me 2 of your best swords. You want 2 swords with only 100,000 berries? The man glared at him. If you're looking to buy 1 sword each for around 50,000, I've only got blunt pieces of trash to sell ya. Zoro shrugged his arms. That'll be good since I have no money right now. Hey. The man suddenly stuttered. Could I maybe see that sword of why yours? What's with the stuttering? Zoro's sweat dropped and handed the man his precious sword. After thoroughly examining the sword, the man looked up with a blank expression. Meh, this is no good. This is just a piece of junk. What? Zoro grabbed him by his shirt and glared at him. Okay. Fake tears began to run down the male's face. Sorry, I was lying just now. Quote, alright, I know you're broke, so let me propose something. The man began, still holding on to Zoro's swords. This sword you've got here certainly ain't no junk, but it's no masterpiece either. It's an above average sword. So I'll offer you 200,000 for this sword, meaning that you'll have to 300,000 in total. With that much money you can buy 3 decent swords at 100,000 belly apiece. Zoro blinked. What are you talking about? No. Then how about for 500,000? The man huffed. Okay fine, you leave me with no choice. I'll buy it for 650,000. Listen pal, Zoro began, this sword isn't something for sale. So, no way. He was cut off when a woman with short raven hair pushed past him and leaned over the desk. Ah, this sword, could it be? The woman grabbed the sword and smiled in delight. She lifted her glasses to take a better look at it. This is Wado Ikimonji, right? Wado. Zoro blinked, staring at the girl and then back at the sword and then at the girl once more. Honestly didn't think I'd see her again. Such a beautiful edge, she continued, oblivious to Zoro's glare. Why yes. The man stuttered. It does happen to go by such a name, but it's still just a decent sword at best. He gave a nervous smile, not wanting Zoro to find out that he was trying to rip him off. Decent. The girl gaped at him and pulled out a small book. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. Why, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. This is one of the 21 greatest swords. It's famous. And it's also a sword that can't be bought for anything less than 1,000,000 berries. Damn it, woman. He slammed his fist down onto the desk in frustration. You've gone and told him everything. I should sue you for obstruction of business. Obstruction of business. She put her glasses back on. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? It's just that I've never seen such a fine sword before and you've come to pick up your sugar, right? He tossed her the sword. I can't believe a timid girl like you carries around a high-grade sword. Eek. She stumbled backwards and fell, knocking over a bunch of swords in the process. The heck are you falling over there for? He gave her a nasty glare. Put all those swords back in their place and just leave already. Ah. The woman glanced at Zoro for the first time. Didn't we meet earlier just now on the streets? She stood up and gave him a bright smile, pushing her glasses up on her face. So you love swords, do you? If you don't mind me saying so, your 3 swords reminds me of a certain bounty hunter. A certain bounty hunt. Zoro hid his smirk as he slid the Wado Ikimonji back into its sheath. I'm talking about Roronoa Zoro. Do you know him? She pressed on, giving Moshi a strange look. I have heard of his name quite a bit. The green-haired swordsman replied, examining a few swords hanging on the wall. Yes, he's quite a famous swordsman here in the East Blue. Or should I say infamous? She shrugged. To think that he treats his swords as merely a means to make money, it's simply unforgivable. The woman glanced down at her own sword and sighed. Why is it that the evil are so strong in this day and age? All the famous swordsmen of today are either pirates or bounty hunters. And they are the ones who possess most of the world's masterwork blades. The swords are crying now. Well, perhaps they have their own circumstances. No. Zoro shrugged. Occupations reflect the needs of the time after all. I'd be more than happy to welcome any criminals. The shop owner suddenly cut into the conversation. I remember when my shop used to be teeming with all sorts of people trying to enter the Grand Line. Ever since that monster was placed in charge of this town, I barely get any more customers. Smoker is no monster. The girl who looked so much like Zoro's childhood friend glared at the shop owner. He's a devil fruit user. The store owner glared right back at her. That's more than enough reason to call him a monster. Devil fruit, Zoro muttered thoughtfully. In any case, being a swordsman myself, I vow to train harder and harder with my Shigur. The girl boldly proclaimed, tightly clutching said sword. I want to travel the world and retrieve all masterwork blades from the hands of criminals. I shall risk my life to retrieve all of them. Does that mean you'll take this sword too? Zoro smirked at her, holding up his own legendary sword. This sword you call Wado Ikimanji. What? She blinked and hastily waved her hands. Oh no, not at all. It's not that I want these swords for myself. I just simply detest the idea of them being used for evil. Quote. Zoro chose not to reply, instead shrugging his shoulders. Moshi narrowed his eyes at the shop owner. He seemed suspicious looking. Ah, I remember seeing this sword in my book before. She picked up a sword hanging off the wall. Sandai Kidetsu. You should definitely buy this sword. Mister, are you selling this sword for only 50,000? Why yes. The store owner dropped his head. I am. Zoro took the sword and placed Moshi onto the counter before glancing at the sword in his hand once more. It's cursed, isn't it? You knew. The store owner blinked. No. Zoro narrowed his eyes. I can tell. It's as you said. The store owner became gravely serious. Beginning with the Shodai Kidetsu, the Kidetsu line of blades are renowned for their quality, but they are also cursed swords. Many famous swordsmen of the past have suffered tragic deaths after carrying around the Kidetsu swords. That's why you won't find a swordsman who dares to use it these days. Even if a person was unaware of the curse behind these blades, they'd still end up dead after wielding one. I wish I could get rid of that damn sword, but I'm afraid of being cursed too. Forgive me. The Kuina look-alike bowed her head. I had no idea it was such a dangerous sword, and ended up saying something foolish. HMPH. The store owner rolled his eyes. This is why amateurs like you shouldn't act like they're experts on swords. I like it, Zoro suddenly stated, holding up the cursed sword. I like it so much that I'll take it. Why, you idiot? The store owner stuttered, giving the green-haired swordsman a surprised look. I said it's not for sale. If I did sell it to you and you ended up dead, then it would be like I was the one who killed you. Then how about this? Zoro smirked once more. Why don't we test what's stronger? My luck, or its curse. If I lose, he continued, tossing the sword into the air and holding his arm out. Then that just means I was never a man who was meant to do anything special. He'll lose his arm. The store owner gaped in fear. The sharpness of that blade. The woman stared at the sword as it fell, covering her mouth and praying that he wouldn't lose his arm. Even Moshi was scared for Zoro. Their journey was only beginning. What would Luffy and the others do if they found out that their only swordsman lost one of his arms? Or worse, what if he died? That thought alone was enough to put Moshi into a state of shock. The sword seemingly fell in slow motion. It flipped and flipped and flipped, and then it was on the ground and Zoro still had his arm outstretched and there wasn't a scratch on his arm. The store owner fell to the ground out of fear and the Kuina look-alike also fell, looking more than stunned. Moshi could only sigh in relief. I'll take it. Zoro grinned and happily picked up the sword. Hey you. He pointed at the blue-haired woman. Pick out another good sword for me. She blinked, seemingly snapping out of her shocked state. Okay. She slowly stood up. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. The store owner suddenly stood up and disappeared behind a door. He came back moments later, holding another sword. This is a black lacquered longsword with an unraveled edge. Its name is Yubashiri, one of the 50 skillful grade swords. I can personally attest to its sharpness. Although my store may not be much, this is the best sword I have. I can't buy that, Zoro stated, picking up Moshi and placing him onto his shoulder. I told you, I have no money. I'm not asking for money. Just take it, the store owner replied. And of course I won't ask you to pay for Sandai Kidetsu either. I apologize for trying to trick you before. It's been a long time since I've seen a swordsman as good as you. As they say, the sword chooses its owner. So I shall also believe in your good luck and pray. Gucha. It sure does feel nice walking around with 3 swords again. Zoro muttered, walking through the busy streets of Loungetown once more. Moshi sat on his shoulder, bobbing his head like always when all of a sudden a bird swooped low and grabbed the poor snail by his shell. Zoro didn't seem to notice, he was too busy admiring his new swords to notice a bird swoop past him with Moshi in his clutches. Moshi flew away, deciding to not even try to get Zoro's attention. This has happened twice today, and Moshi was already tired of it. When was he gonna get a break? Honestly, these pirates were gonna drive him crazy. The bird continued to fly away from Zoro and over the buildings. Moshi glanced down at all the different people in the crowd. They all seemed like normal people. Except for that one guy who was wearing a green cloak and looked as if he had tattoos on his face. Yeah, he looked suspicious. Just like the other bird, this one crashed into a building and they both went flying downwards. Was this really it? He had gotten lucky last time. But he knew that there was no way he would get lucky this time. So this was God's way of telling him his time was up. The Den Den Mushi closed his teal eyes and sighed sadly. He landed on something soft, and didn't seem to notice this fact until he felt himself being picked up. He opened his eyes and was surprised to see curly eyebrows and blonde locks. Moshi. Sanji stared at him in surprise before glancing up at the sky in which he had fallen. Weren't you just with Usopp? How'd you get up there? And Woa, Moshi cut him off when he slid onto Sanji's shoulder and rubbed his little head against his cheek. He really had gotten lucky this time. Guess you're with me for the time being, Sanji shrugged and lit up another cigarette. Let's go. Gucha. Woa. Sanji and Moshi stood in front of a cart with a giant fish on it. The man behind the cart gave them a smile. Welcome, he stated, putting his hands on his hips. What's this funky fish called? Sanji asked, pointing at the huge fish in awe. This is an elephant tuna. The male replied, smiling proudly. You normally wouldn't see these tuna around these parts, but one just so happened to swim up here from the southern seas. And so I snatched it right up with my fishing pole. You caught this? Sanji asked in amazement. Shall I cut it up for you? No. Sanji shook his head. I'll take the whole thing. Thank you for your generosity, sir. As the man was putting the large fish into the bag, Sanji and Moshi noticed Usopp walk over towards them. Is that Usopp? Sanji muttered. What does he need here? Usopp bent down and stared in delight at some eggs. Holy crap, these eggs are so cheap. Sanji's sweat dropped. What is he, a housewife? Gucha. Good thing I managed to run into you, Usopp. Sanji grinned as he and Usopp walked through the streets carrying the large fish. Why do I have to carry the heavier side? Usopp growled. Well, I'm glad you found Moshi. Nami and I thought we had lost him forever. Oh, by the way, I happened to see a lion just a little while ago. Sanji continued, ignoring Usopp. But there was this weird-looking guy in a costume riding him. Nami. Zoro. Usopp blinked and the two men came to a stop as Nami and Zoro came into view. Nami was carrying a very large bag, and Zoro was holding on to 3 new swords. Moshi. Nami smiled in relief. You're safe. Usopp and I were so worried. Funny, I could have sworn he was just sitting on my shoulder. Zoro scratched his head. But anyway, where's Luffy? He said he wanted to check out the execution stand. Nami stated. Isn't the execution stand right here in the town square? Usopp asked, checking his surroundings. Well. Sanji pointed up at the execution stand, and there sat Luffy looking like, well, an idiot. Yes, actually the one about to be killed right now. Quote. Why the hell is he on the execution stand? All 4 pirates shouted, waving their arms and sweat dropping. A certain red-nosed clown stood above Luffy with a sinister smirk on his face. For the crime of angering me, he loudly began, catching the attention of everyone in the audience. I sentence you, Monkey D. Luffy, to a flashy execution. The pirates working under Buggy started cheering, shooting guns and wildly waving their swords. Yahoo! Let's cause a flashy ruckus, boys. This is the first time I've seen an execution. Luffy stated. You're the one being executed here. Buggy yelled, surprised at just how idiotic the rubber male was. What? Luffy cried, staring at him with big eyes. Are you kidding me? No, you stop kidding around. Buggy replied, deadpanning. Anyhow, your flashy execution shall now be carried out for the whole world to see. Any last words? Luffy pouted before taking a deep breath. He narrowed his eyes at the people staring up at him and then he spoke. I'm the man who's gonna become the Pirate King. Is that all you have to say, rubber boy? Buggy lifted up his sword. Wait, Luffy looked down at the astounded audience. Zoro. Sanji. Help me out here. Right. Both men replied, running towards the execution stand. Moshi was still on Sanji's shoulder, but he was just barely hanging on. In any case, we have got to bring that execution stand down. Zoro yelled. I know. Sanji replied. The Buggy pirates were trying to stop Zoro and Sanji, and it was a blur of Sanji's fierce kicks and Zoro's blades clashing against all of these small fries. Moshi was constantly being tossed through the air, sometimes landing on Zoro's shoulder and other times landing on Sanji's head or even on a random pirate. The two men were giving it their all, Moshi could tell that much. Zoro. Luffy yelled. Sanji, Usopp, Nami and Moshi. He smiled as Buggy's sword was inches from clashing with his head. Sorry, Shishishi, but it looks like I'm dead. An explosion of lightning could be seen and then there was darkness and Moshi couldn't see a damn thing, not even with his amazing eyesight. Gucha, Shishishi. Luffy stood over a burnt execution stand and a knocked out Buggy. Looks like I survived after all. Oi, Sanji lit up another cigarette, looking a bit worse for wear. Do you believe in God? Rain began to fall all around them. Moshi happily sat on Luffy's shoulder, glad that he was okay. He tucked himself into his shell when the rain began to fall. Sanji scowled when he couldn't get his cigarette to light. Enough talking and let's leave this town already. Zoro replied, also looking worse for wear. We've got more trouble heading our way. And just as he said that, a group of Marines appeared with guns in their hands and came running towards them. Run for it, Sanji yelled and the three men took off running, not caring in the least that so many people were staring after them in shock and awe. The men weren't able to make it out of there on a clear path. There were plenty of Marines they had to occasionally knock out as they headed towards the merry-go. The wind's getting worse, Zoro commented, looking up at the sky. Geez, these guys are so persistent. Luffy pointed behind them. Should we just stop and fight them all off? Don't, Sanji stated. There will be no end to them. Most importantly, Nami told us to return to the ship as quickly as possible and, The three men blinked as a certain blue-haired woman stood in front of them with an angered look in her eyes. To think that you were Roronoa Zoro. Tashigi growled. And a pirate at that too. You were just toying with me all along. You bastard, Sanji yelled. What did you do to that lady? Never thought you were a marine. Zoro muttered. I shall take that Wado Ikimonji. Tashigi growled, holding up her sword. Just try it. Zoro smirked, not at all afraid of this woman. Of course, Zoro wasn't afraid of anything except Nami's debts. Zoro and Tashigi's swords clashed. Go on ahead without me, Zoro told them as they ran by. That bastard dares to hurt a lady. Sanji growled, leaving Luffy to pull him as they continued to make their escape. Moshi, Luffy stated. Hang on tight. I know it's a rough ride, but you're strong. Moshi nodded his head fiercely and held onto Luffy's shoulder tightly, though the rain was making it hard. Look Sanji. Someone is up ahead, Luffy yelled over the rain. Another small fry. Sanji tsked. Who are you? Luffy called. The man was somehow able to speak with 2 cigars in his mouth. The name's Smoker. I'm a captain of the Marine headquarters. He took a deep breath before continuing to speak. And I won't allow you to set sail from here. With that being said, his arms turned into smoke and it quickly surrounded the 2 men and Moshi. One puff of smoke, or rather his fist, wrapped around Luffy's waist and lifted the Straw Hat Boy into the air. Wah! Luffy wildly waved his arms. You freak of nature, Sanji yelled, delivering a kick to the smoke, only for it to be grabbed and then he too was lifted off the ground. I don't have time for runts. White blow, he stated before throwing Sanji into a nearby building. Sanji, Luffy cried. Why you? Gomu Gomu no pistol. His fist shot at Smoker's body, but he disappeared in a puff of smoke and reappeared behind Luffy. Are you really worth 30 million belly? He asked, staring Moshi straight in the eye and wondering just why a snail was sitting on his shoulder. Smoker jumped onto Luffy's back and slammed him into the ground, knocking Moshi off his shoulder and onto the concrete. HMPH. Smoker sighed. Looks like your luck's come to an end, he stated, reaching for his giant sword thingy. Or perhaps not, a voice suddenly stated, placing a hand onto Smoker's gloved fist. Smoker looked up in surprise, nearly dropping his cigars. You're, the man with the green cloak from earlier stood before Moshi's eyes. What? Luffy muttered, his face practically buried into the ground. Who's there? The entire government is after your head, you know. Smoker casually continued, ignoring Luffy's question. The world awaits our answer. The mysterious man replied, giving him a small smirk. A gust suddenly blew Luffy and Moshi away, and Zoro appeared from out of nowhere dragging Sanji with him. Guys, he yelled, run for it or we will be trapped on this island. A huge-ass storm is coming. Luffy rubbed his head, putting Moshi back onto his shoulder. Wah, I said move it. Zoro grabbed Luffy and dragged the both of them towards their destination. Gucha, Yahoo! Luffy cried, once he and the others had somehow made it out to sea in the dangerous storm. The ship feels like it will flip right over. You see that light over there? Nami pointed towards the only sign of light on the pitch-black sea. The entrance to the Grand Line is just up ahead. So what shall we do? This calls for celebration, Sanji stated, putting a barrel into the middle of the ship and placing Moshi on top. He put his foot onto the barrel and grinned. To finding the all blue. Zoro put his foot onto the barrel and smirked. To become the greatest swordsman. Luffy put his sandaled foot onto the barrel and smiled his strange little smile. To become Pirate King. Nami put her foot onto the barrel, her small feet contrasting greatly with the rest of the men's large feet. To draw a map of the world. Finally Usopp placed his foot onto the barrel and smiled proudly, looking at his new friends. TT to become a brave warrior of the sea. Moshi only happily shook his entire body, his teal eyes glistening in happiness. One could tell that he really was growing. He was slightly bigger and his skin was a more silverish color. To being with them forever. The snail thought to himself. The East Blue Five smiled at each other. To the Grand Line we go. Chapter 22, we are. I'm not joking this time. Luffy stood on a barrel with a small dagger in his little hand and his expression that of determination. I've had enough. I'll prove it for you all to see. Everyone in the village were up and at it on this sunny day in Fuchsia village. They either paid Luffy no mind and continued on with their lives, or they stopped to stare and chuckle and to see what the child would do next. Haha, go for it. Shanks called, putting his fist up and clutching his straw hat. Let's see what you're gonna do. Luffy's gonna do something funny again. One of the pirates grinned, putting his hands onto hips. Get on with it, Luffy. Ben Beckman called. Luffy took the dagger and plunged it deep into the skin below his eye. The villagers and the pirates stood there gaping for a moment, before Shanks ran forward and brought his fist down onto his head. Idiot. What the hell are you doing? Gall D. Roger, the king of the pirates, obtained this and everything else the world had to offer. And his dying words drove countless souls to the seas. Gahaha. Drink, drink. Sake, sake. Bring out more sake. Idiot. That's my meat. Shut up. It's mine now. Yo, cut it out. To brawl while you're drunk is shameful. Ah. Luffy smiled, sitting on a stool in a certain bar around a certain group of merry pirates. He had a bandage under his eye, and while it would heal it would also leave behind a scar. It didn't hurt one bit. Liar. Shanks pointed an accusing finger at him. Don't do anything so stupid again. I'm not afraid of pain at all. Luffy threw up his hands and laughed. Next time take me out to sea, Shanks. I wanna be a pirate too. Ha. Shanks chuckled. You can't handle being a pirate. Not being able to swim is a pirate's greatest weakness. As long as I stay on board the ship, I'll be fine. Luffy replied. Besides, my fighting is pretty good too. I've rigorously trained before. My punch is as strong as pistol fire. Pistol. Shanks put his cheek into the palm of his hand. Wow, really? That's so cool. What kind of tone is that? He glared at Shanks. The most important thing is that you're still too young. Shanks continued. Wait at least another 10 years and I'll consider taking you out to sea. Darn it, Shanks. Luffy stomped his foot. Let me tell you something. I'm not a little kid anymore. Ah, don't be mad. Shanks grinned and handed him a glass of orange juice. Here, drink some juice. Thanks. Luffy happily took the glass of orange juice and drank it. You really are a kid. Shanks and the rest of the pirates burst into laughter. How funny. Shanks cried, slapping his hand onto the bar table a few times. What a dirty trick. Luffy yelled, glaring at everyone in the bar. A baby snail with a tiny shell sat on the stool beside Luffy, curled up into a little ball and watching the pirates laugh at Luffy as he continued to try to act like a grown-up. You want my treasure? You can have it. I left everything I gathered together in one place. Now you just have to find it. Quote. Thanks Luffy. Makino told me about everything. Shanks grinned, trying his best to keep both himself and Luffy afloat in the water. Thanks for sticking up for us. And hey, don't cry. You're a man now, right? But Shanks. Luffy sobbed, clutching Shanks' shirt and wetting it with both his tears in the ocean water. Shanks, your arm. Shanks' arm had been bitten off by the sea monster from earlier, but he paid it no mind. It's nothing. It's just an arm. Luffy's lower lip was quivering and he shut his eyes, refusing to stare at what Shanks had lost because of him. SS Shanks. These words lured men to the Grand Line, pursuing dreams greater than they ever dared to imagine. This is the time known as the Great Pirate Era. You're really leaving this time? Luffy asked, staring up at Shanks with wide eyes. Yep. Shanks sighed. We've stayed here long enough. It's about time we set sail. Are you upset? Yeah. Luffy frowned for a moment. But I won't ask you to take me with you anymore. I'll become a pirate by myself. Hey, I wouldn't take you even if you begged. He stuck his tongue out. You don't have what it takes to become a pirate. Yes I do. Luffy stomped his foot in agitation, catching the attention of all the pirates around him. One day I'll find myself a pirate crew as strong as yours. And then I'll find the world's biggest treasure. And I'll become king of the pirates. Oh, you want to be bigger than us, huh? Shanks took off his straw hat and placed it onto Luffy's head. Then this hat is my gift to you. This is my favorite hat, you know. When you become Pirate King, give that hat back to me. Shanks hopped onto his ship, with his crewmates and they all waved goodbye as they began sailing away. Makino put her hands on Luffy's shoulder and giggled when the baby snail from earlier snuggled up against her cheek. Come on board and bring along all your hopes and dreams. Let's introduce the crew. Nami smiled at Moshi before she picked him up and began walking. There's me, the oh-so-cunning navigator. She winked. I'm a total cutie. She pointed the Den Den Mushi at Zoro, who was lazily leaning against the mast of the ship. Here's Mr. Frowns a lot. Oh Cammy, I hope I never have to wake up to that face. Zoro deadpanned. You'd think that she would be hugging and crying against me after having just helped save her village. He muttered sarcastically. I am thankful. She smiled fondly. Don't get so worked up, Zoro. Zoro only smirked in reply. TCH. Here's Long Nose. She pointed Moshi at Usopp, who was just walking out of the boys' room. Long Nose. PFF'd, actually I'm Captain Usopp. He stuck his nose into the air and crossed his arms over his chest proudly. I've got a whole fleet of men under me, and I'm known as a brave warrior of the sea. And, moving on, Nami turned and walked away from him. Hey, Usopp's sweat dropped. Here's Sanji-kun. Nami walked into the small kitchen and smiled at Sanji, who danced in delight at her presence though his face was shadowed by his blonde hair. He's an amazing cook. He makes the best dishes. Nami swan. Sanji twirled around. I'm going to make a delicious drink just for you. Thank you. Nami giggled before leaving the small kitchen and leaving Sanji to think about the many ways he would woe his precious Nami swan. And finally, we have the future pirate king himself. Nami's wide smile turned soft as she watched Luffy sit on his special place, which was on the Going Merry's head. The rubber man turned and smiled widely at Moshi, holding up 2 fingers. Shishishi. I'm on my way to becoming Pirate King, Shanks. Together we will find everything that we're looking for. Oi, Shanks, Yasop, Ace, Minna, look at me. Monkey D. Luffy stuck his face into the recorder, a large smile on his silly face. Guess what? Come on, guess. The rubber man tilted his head to the side and frowned when no one responded. How come you guys aren't responding? Oh wait, you haven't seen this yet, Shishishi. Luffy was on a tiny dinghy, having just left his small village hours ago setting sail to become the king of the pirates. The skies behind him were a light blue and the ocean below him was deep abyss of bluish-greenish colors with a tiny fish flying to the surface here and there. I've set sail. Shishishi. I'm gonna become king of the pirates and there's nothing you can do about that, Shanks. He pointed the camera upward then downward before he leaned back in the small dinghy and smiled his idiotic smile. I don't have a pirate crew yet but I'll gather one soon. Just you watch WOA, Luffy yelped in surprise before smiling at the fact that the waters around him were now spinning and that the boat was going around in circles. Looks like we'll have to continue this conversation later. One Piece. To our new ship, Nami shouted, raising her drink up. To my new friends, Usopp yelled, holding up his own drink. To Sake, delicious Sake, nature's freshest water, Zoro called out, holding his drink to his lips. And to the many adventures ahead of us. Shishishi. Luffy concluded, smiling that idiotic smile. Yeah, compass left behind. It'll only slow us down. Ha ha ha. Hey Shanks. Luffy smiled widely. I dunno how I lost it but I'm glad that I got it back, Nami. Luffy frowned when the orange-haired woman took the Den Den Mushi from him, and pointed it away from Luffy and towards her and Zoro. No one wants to look at a recording of you with food all over your face. The three were, once again, sitting in a small booth inside a small cafe-like restaurant. Nami and Zoro sported a few new cuts and bruises, but were overall fine. It was obvious to whoever was viewing that the trio must have been through a lot on this day. Oi. Zoro placed his elbow onto the table and put his cheek into the palm of his hand. We've had our meal. And we've done all we need to do, so should we get going? Nay, you're right, Zoro. Luffy stretched before leaning back in his seat. Wait. Zoro frowned deeply. I just need 1 more cup of sake, or 5. You're gonna die from alcohol poisoning one day. Nami stated, rolling her eyes, but smiling nonetheless. Stupid. Who are you calling stupid? Zoro glared at her and Nami, in return, stuck out her tongue at him. The stupidest one at this table, of course. That would be this one. Zoro replied, pulling at Luffy's rubber cheeks. But even I have to admit that he's a genius when it comes to battles. Your heart will be your guide. Raise the sails and take the helm. So you're really heading out to sea, Usopp-san? Kaya asked. Yeah, of course. I'm gonna become a brave warrior of the sea, Kaya. It's my dream. Usopp replied, leaning against his large bag. And when I come back I can tell you all about all the adventures I have been on and all the challenges that I've faced. The blonde-haired beauty laughed behind her hand. Okay, Usopp-san. Anyway. Usopp smiled at the Den Den Mushi. This is goodbye to that camcorder and to you guys. Thanks again for helping me save my village, Luffy. Maybe one day we'll meet on the dangerous seas. The hell are you going on about? Zoro asked, crossing his arms. Hurry up and get on board. Yeah, come on, Usopp. Nami leaned against the railing beside Luffy. We don't have all day. You're our nakama now, right? Luffy more so stated than asked. And come on, the Den Den Mushi is about to shut off. Usopp stared up at the trio. Nami was giving him a closed-eyed smile, and Zoro was standing there with his arms crossed over his chest and with a hint of a smirk on his face. And finally there was Luffy, who was giving him the biggest and most idiotic grin he had ever seen. These were the people who had helped him save his village. They were the people who stepped in and fought to the best of their ability in order to protect what he cherished the most. They were the people who were offering to help him fulfill his dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea. They were his new nakama. The long-nosed male laughed a little, before he jumped onto the ship with a grin of his own. Does this mean I get to be captain? No way. Luffy frowned childishly. I'm the captain, but I'm brave Captain Usopp. Nope. I'm the king of the pirates, Monkey D. Luffy. That legendary place, that the end of the map reveals. Look, Minna. Luffy shoved his wanted poster into Moshi's face. Looks like we are wanted men now. It says 30 million belly. And there Luffy was, smiling his strange smile in the picture and waving his hand. Once again, you fail to understand the gravity of your situation. Nami's head dropped. You do realize that this means your life is at risk. With that bounty, I'm sure the Marine HQ as well as other strong bounty hunters will come after you. Look, my picture is here for the whole world to see. Usopp pointed at himself, or rather the back of his head in the bounty photo. I might be famous. That's just the back of your head. Sanji rolled his eyes. Don't be jealous now. Usopp grinned. Once we become more infamous we might all get one. Quote. With this, we can't afford to just loiter around in East Blue much longer. Nami muttered, putting her finger on her chin in thought. Alright men, let's head to the Grand Line. Luffy yelled. Aye. Sanji and Usopp yelled, fist pumping happily. It's only legendary. Till someone proves it real. I've got 2 members of my crew now. Isn't that awesome, Minna? Luffy grinned and pointed the camcorder upwards. There was the Jolly Roger for Captain Buggy blowing harshly in the wind. We stole this small boat from some guy named Buggy. He says that you and him used to butt heads as enemies, Shanks. Shishishi. You guys sure are boneheads. Nami commented, crossing her arms. She was seated on a small boat beside them and her treasure bags were seated close to her, with her weapon in her hand, as if she were afraid that the two would steal the bags the first chance they got. Luffy ignored her comment and brought his hat up to the Den Den Mushi. Nami fixed my hat for me. Luffy waved the hat happily. See, she's nice even if she can be scary sometimes. Oi Luffy. Zoro yawned. You're too loud. I'm trying to sleep. I think you've had more than enough sleep. Nami deadpanned. Through it all. Through all the troubled time. Let's go, Sanji said, standing in front of Luffy with a small smile on his face. Just like that, Luffy tilted his head to the side. What about goodbyes? It's fine, Sanji replied. There's no need. Oi Sanji. Chef Zeph called, making the curly-eyebrowed cook freeze. Quote. Don't catch a cold, he said, a small smile on his face. Sanji's eyes began to well with tears, his emotional barrier breaking. He turned around to face the man who took care of him for so long. Oh owner Zeph. Sanji got onto his hands and knees and bowed. I'm eternally grateful to you, for taking care of me for so damn long. I shall never forget, for the rest of my life, the debt I owe to you for saving my life. All around Sanji the cooks were bursting into tears at Sanji's declaration. Damn you Sanji, you bastard. We're gonna miss you. You're making us cry, damn it. Damn idiots, Zeph muttered, a few tears making their way down his own cheeks. Real men should say their goodbyes in silence. Let's meet again one day. Sanji cried. You good-for-nothing bastards. Alright, Luffy shouted. Let's set sail. Through the heartache. And through the pain. Wait, everyone. Nami suddenly appeared from behind, panting lightly. Nami. Nojiko muttered, staring at her little sister. Guys, don't worry about it. Put down those weapons. Nami began walking towards the group. Please, just wait a little more. I'll try my best again. Nami smiled widely. I promise I'll raise enough money once again. It should be easier this time. So please, I ask that you. Nami was cut off when Genzo suddenly stepped forward and hugged her. That's enough, Nami. You know that doing such a thing would be futile. You've carried all of our hopes on your shoulders for a long time. Genzo whispered. You've fought for a long time. I know that working with them must have been worse than being stabbed by 1,000 knives. You have fought well, but now, you can leave this village. What? Nami's eyes were starting to water but she kept the tears and she wasn't done fighting yet. Nami. Nojiko cut her off. You're smart, and you've got what it takes to live. And you have a dream to fulfill. Nojiko. Nami pulled out a small dagger. No, everyone stop. I don't want to see anyone get hurt by those fishmen. You'll all die. We know. Genzo replied. Quote. Now move out of the way, Nami. Let's go, everyone. Everyone marched past Nami with anger evident in their eyes. They were marching to their deaths, but it didn't matter. They were going to die for Nami. Nami. Nojiko whispered as she marched past. Live, okay. And then they were gone. Nami sunk to her knees, clutching her arm. The female was shaking as she stared at the tattoo of the Arlong pirates on her arm. Arlong, she shakily whispered. The Den Den Mushi crawled away from Luffy and towards Nami. He wanted to help comfort her. He wanted to see her smile again. He hated to see her look so broken. The snail didn't want any of his new friends to look broken. Nami growled suddenly, glaring at the Arlong pirate's tattoo on her arm. She suddenly lifted up her dagger and stabbed it. Arlong, she growled. Arlong. She continued to stab her arm, not caring about the blood oozing out of her. Arlong. She huffed in rage and continuously stabbed herself. Arlong. AR. Her arm stopped mid-air as Luffy stood before her with his fingers wrapped around her wrist. Luffy. Nami whispered. What do you want? You don't know anything about this island. Ah, I don't. This has nothing to do with you, didn't I tell you to leave? Yeah, you did. Leave. She began to throw sand at him, her whole body trembling. Leave, 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 leave. Nami's tears fell quickly. All those years of holding back, all those years of standing strong, all those years came collapsing around her. She put her hand to her mouth as the tears fell faster, and her nose began to run with snot. Luffy, she whispered. She turned to him with red eyes and a trembling physique. Help me. ... Luffy took off his hat and placed it onto Nami's head. The rubber male turned away from her and took a deep breath. Of course I will, he shouted, throwing his hands up into the air. Know that I will there to stand by you. Just like I know you'll stand by me. Luffy. Nami began to rush towards the rubble, but was held back by Johnny and Yosaku. Brother, Johnny muttered. Arlong Park is destroyed. Which one of them won? Just what the hell happened in there? Usopp scurried over to Nami's side and they both shared glances of worry. And suddenly, from the wreckage, a tall figure stood up with blood running down his arms, his fists clenched, and his black hair messier than usual. Luffy, Nami, Usopp, Yosaku, and Johnny cried in unison. Luffy took a deep breath before speaking once more. Nami, you're my crewmate, you're my nakama. Got it. Nami could feel the wind blowing her hair around as his words reached her ears. Tears began to spill down her cheeks, and this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. Gee, got it, she replied, wiping away her tears with her wrists. So come on board and bring along all your hopes and dreams. Really, what was that idiotic warlord thinking? Mr. Zero blew on his cigar even more. Why didn't out-transponder snails pick up anything of importance? All of these videos show nothing but how idiotic some pirates are and how weak they are. Watch them die before they even make it here, to the Grand Line, Miss All Sunday. Miss All Sunday chuckled. That may be the case. She tipped her hat down. But they seem like an amusing bunch. I'd hate to see them die so easily. Turn it off. Mr. Zero rolled his eyes. I don't want to see any more of this absurdity. As you wish. The mysterious raven-haired woman swiftly shut off the Den Den Mushi. Together we will find everything that we're looking for. Dracula Mihawk was spotted hanging around a bunch of pirates again. Why must this concern any of us? He is a warlord and free to do whatever he pleases, so long as he does not betray us. A tall man with short black hair and icy black eyes stated, arching an eyebrow. He was drinking from a tall glass of ice-cold water, the water being turned to ice by him. Besides, he's always hanging around pirates. He picks them off, however many he can. True, true. The male beside him nodded. You are correct. However, he did not pick off these pirates like he usually would. The man crossed to his long legs, the dark yellow of his suit contrasting with his white admiral coat. But you should watch these videos that our Den Den Mushi specialists have tracked. A bunch of new pirates have entered this era and are trying to make a name for themselves. Videos. The man with the cold glass of water in his hands raised an eyebrow. What is the name of the pirate in these videos? Luffy. Luffy. The icy male scratched his head. That name sort of sounds familiar. Who cares? A third male stated, crossing his legs and arms. His fists burned a dark red, as if they were made of molten lava, and his eyes also seemingly burned with anger. Just let them be. As long as the pirate doesn't enter the Grand Line and cause mayhem, he is of no importance to us. The man with the cold glass of water in his hands grunted in agreement. Yellow Suit shrugged. I suppose. There is always room for you. Hey, monkey. D. Luffy EH. An old man with long silverish hair chuckled, pushing his glasses up. Reminds me of a certain someone. He closed his eyes then, a smile on his face. Mihawk, good on ya. You let that boy and his crew live. That was a good decision. Or maybe it was a bad one, it could be a mixture of both. He's got a long way to go if he thinks he can take Roger's title of Pirate King. The old man smirked. But that kid, you can see it in his eyes. He has the will of D. If you wanna be my friend. Luffy. Shanks grinned, putting his hand on his precious straw hat. Behind him stood Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, Yasop, and the rest of his crew. Makino was also there, giving him a cheery smile alongside the mayor of Fushia Village. Ace was also there, with his hand on his hat and a wide smile. Zoro. Koshiro stood there with an expression that was difficult to read. Beside him was Kuina, holding up a sword and smiling happily. The rest of the children from the dojo also stood there, each with goofy smiles on their faces. Nami. Belmere had a cigarette in her mouth and was smiling proudly, one hand on her hip and the other holding a fresh tangerine. Beside her stood Nojiko, with her arms behind her back and a mischievous smile on her full lips. Genzo was also there, his signature pinwheel on his hat and his arms crossed over his chest. Usopp. Yasop held up his gun and smirked, one arm happily wrapped around the waist of Bakina Usopp's mother. Kaya also stood there, giving him a closed-eye smile and politely waving. The three boys in his village held up wooden swords and smiled proudly. Sanji. Zeph smirked, his hands on his hips. Behind him stood the rest of the cooks, each of them holding up various kitchen utensils. We are Hey, I see an island. Zoro called. Nami picked up Moshi and everyone. Walked towards the railing where Zoro was standing. Indeed there was an island, and indeed they were approaching it. That island is proof that we are close to the Grand Line. Nami stated. On that island, there's an infamous town called Loungetown. It's also known as the twin of the beginning and the end. It's the birthplace of the former pirate king Roger, as well as his execution spot. So that's where the former pirate king died. Luffy stared at the island in wonder. Shall we head there? Nami asked, tucking a strand of tangerine-colored orange hair behind her ear. Yosh, to Loungetown we go, Luffy yelled, pointing towards the town with a huge smile on his face. We are. Nay, I'm really happy. Luffy smiled at Moshi, the wind blowing his jet black locks around wildly. The two were perched on Mary's head, enjoying the beautiful view of the sun setting in the sky, its orange-red color contrasting beautifully against the deep, dark blue abyss that was the sea. I'm really going on an adventure. Luffy stated, pulling his knees up to his chest. I'm really on my way to becoming Pirate King. Moshi smiled happily, bobbing his little head in happiness. His body was no longer the pale white it used to be, it was shining a little, as if it was slowly turning into a silverish color. I've already gathered plenty of strong crewmates. Luffy continued. Zoro, my first mate, he's really strong. He's great with swords, though he's no fun at times. And who knows, he might even defeat that one guy, Mihawk, one day. Luffy closed his eyes and continued to smile. There's Nami, she's my navigator. And she's probably better than you, Ben Beckman. Luffy stuck his tongue out at the camcorder and laughed. She's really smart, and a really good person. But she likes to steal my wallet a lot. Oh well, shishishi. Luffy opened his eyes once more and smiled fondly. Usopp is so much fun to be around. He says really funny things, and I can't believe he's related to Usopp. Your noses look nothing alike. Luffy yawned loudly, stretching his long arms and feet. There's our cook, Sanji, who prefers to keep his face hidden from the camcorder. He's shy around the camera. But he's an amazing cook. You've gotta try his food one day. Hey, Luffy put his hand onto his hat and shook his head. This is my crew. These people, they are my nakama. We've already begun our journey, here in the East Blue. And we're on our way to the Grand Line. Just you wait, Shanks. Ace, Minna, I'm gonna be Pirate King soon. Shishishi. On the cruise, Twin Cape is located at the bottom of Reverse Mountain, at the exit that leads into the Grand Line. The area is located precisely where the Red Line and the Grand Line meet. From here, sailors can choose one of the 7 routes of the Grand Line by waiting for the log post to set on the desired one. Everyone, I'm here to say goodbye. I cannot go with you. Thank you for everything. I want to go adventuring with you some more, but I can't. Because, I love my country. That's why I can't. I will stay here, but if we ever meet again, will you call me a friend once more? I'm sorry. I wanted to bring everyone just a little farther. But I was happy. You always treated me well. Thank you. I was always so happy because of you. Just existing isn't a crime. Where is his will to live? It's gone, just as his strength and mind. Drop it. Stop asking nosy questions. You're a questionable character yourself. You cannot defy a god. We are. Sanji put his foot onto the barrel. To find the all blue. Zoro put his foot onto the barrel and smirked. To become the greatest swordsman. Luffy put his sandaled foot onto the barrel and smiled his strange little smile. To become Pirate King. Nami put her foot onto the barrel, her small feet contrasting greatly with the rest of the men's large feet. To draw a map of the world. Finally Usopp placed his foot onto the barrel and smiled proudly, looking at his new friends. TT to become a brave warrior of the sea. Moshi only happily shook his entire body, his teal eyes glistening in happiness. One could tell that he really was growing, he was slightly bigger and his skin was a more silverish color. To being with them forever. The snail thought to himself. The East Blue 5 smiled at each other. To the Grand Line we go. Chapter 23, Going Up Reverse Mountain. Nami, this is bad. Luffy shouted from his position on Mary's head. He was hanging upside down with his hands behind his back and staring forward, not at all worried about the roaring sea below him. The light just went out. And that was our guiding light too. Well, it is only a lighthouse. Nami replied, standing beside the railing in her large blue raincoat with Moshi on her shoulder and a map in her hands. It can go out from time to time. Besides, it's for times like these you have a navigator, you know. So don't worry. I know the basic direction at least. Wow. Luffy poked his head up and smiled at her, the hair poking out from under his hat dripping wet from the rain. You're amazing. More importantly, could you please get off from there? No. Luffy pouted. This is my spot. When did I ever say I wanted your spot? Nami yelled, her teeth becoming fang-like in a comical way. But her face grew serious at her next words. But this is rather troubling. At this rate, it will be exactly as the rumors say. Gucha. The entrance to the Grand Line is a mountain. Nami placed the map onto the table and glanced at each of her crewmates. Everyone was seated in the kitchen, drinking orange juice from tall glasses. Moshi was seated on the table, close to Usopp, and was drinking something Sanji had given him out of a small bowl. He looked up at her words. A mountain. Usopp's jaw dropped. No way. I had a hard time believing it myself when I looked at the map. Nami calmly stated. But look. She pointed towards the map and everyone leaned in to take a look. The light of guidance was directly pointing at Reverse Mountain located right here on the red line. Does that mean we have to crash through the mountain? Zoro asked, glancing down at his swords. That would be good practice. Usopp looked as if he were about to have a heart attack. Zoro, I wonder if you've been drinking too much today. No. There's a waterway. Nami replied, sighing softly. A waterway. That's crazy. Usopp blinked. Even if that waterway really is there, there's no way a shop could climb up a mountain. Whatever Nami says is right. Sanji stated, lighting up yet another cigarette. Isn't that the map you stole from Buggy? How dependable could it be? Zoro asked, scratching his head. Are we really gonna climb up a mountain on this ship? Luffy asked, already getting excited. That sounds cool. So it's a magic mountain, right? In the first place, why do we even have to enter through the entrance? Couldn't we just head directly south and still enter? Zoro crossed his arms and yawned. No, we can't. Luffy pointed a finger at Zoro and pouted. That's exactly right, Luffy. Nami stated. And there's a perfectly good explanation for that. It's because it's so much cooler to go into the entrance. Luffy proclaimed, looking more serious than ever. That's not the reason. Nami punched him in the back of his head. Guys, the storm suddenly stopped. Usopp stated, standing up to look outside the circle-shaped window inside the kitchen. What? Nami blinked in confusion. That can't be. That storm should have led us directly to the entrance. Nami stood up and went outside, followed by Zoro, Sanji, Luffy with Moshi, and Usopp. Nami stared at her surroundings in shock and gasped. Oh no, we've entered a calm belt. The navigator looked at her friends and frowned. This isn't the time to be standing around. Grab some oars and start rowing as fast as you can. She grabbed Moshi and climbed up the steps hurriedly. We have to return back to the storm immediately. As you wish, Nami Swan. Sanji grinned and gave her a thumbs up. What are you getting so worked up about? Luffy scratched his head. And you know this is a sailship, not a rowboat, right? Why would we even want to go back into that storm? Usopp shuddered. Just shut it and do as I say. Nami yelled, her teeth once again becoming fanged out in a comical way. Gucha, I told you guys to start rowing right away. Nami muttered, tightly clutching the mast of the ship. This place, it's a den for sea kings. And right now, we're on top of one of them. Indeed they were. The Straw Hat crew were surrounded by a dozen or so sea kings, and all the men had shocked expressions on their faces. Usopp looked as if he had passed out. And they were currently sitting on the nose of a giant, blue sea king. Alright, Zoro stood up with a large, brown oar in his hands. Sanji and Luffy stood beside him, both with large parsing of their own in their hands. Moshi was seated on Luffy's straw hat. As soon as this thing dives back down into the ocean, start rowing your arms off, got it? Aye aye, Luffy and Sanji replied, their expressions becoming determined. Ah, the Blue Sea King tilted his head, to the left, tilting the Mary and its inhabitants. Ah, the big, blue monster tilted his head to the right, once more tilting the Mary and the pirates on the ship as well. Achoo! It turns out that the sea monster had sneezed, and that sneeze caused the boat to shoot off of its nose and into the ocean. Only one problem though, the Straw Hat pirates were falling towards a huge, green frog, and their boat was turning upside down. Ah, Nami screeched, clinging to the mast of the ship. A giant frog is hopping this way. Don't get thrown overboard, Luffy yelled. He was also hanging on to the mast of the ship, but he was hanging above Nami and his legs were flailing. Moshi was trying his best to not fall, because he knew he would not be getting lucky this time. Usopp just fell, Nami yelled, and their long-nosed sniper was falling straight into the mouth of the frog. Usopp, Luffy cried, stretching his rubber arm towards his friend in an attempt to save him. His arm wrapped around Usopp's waist and pulled him away from certain death. They were somehow able to steer themselves away from Frog, and as soon as they landed back into the sea, the monster trio began paddling with all their might away from the calm belt and back into the storm. Gucha, thank God we're back in the storm. Luffy tiredly groaned, sprawled out on the deck of the ship with Moshi on his back. He wasn't the only one. Nami was laying on her stomach and looking more exasperated than ever. Sanji and Usopp were also laying on their stomachs, though Usopp seemed almost lifeless after his near-death experience. Sanji hadn't even bothered to light up another cigarette. Zoro was leaning against the mast of the ship, breathing a bit heavily. Now do you understand why we have to use the entrance? Nami asked tiredly. Yeah, Zoro nodded. Understood. Ah, Nami suddenly sat up, tucking a strand of her short orange hair behind her ear. I've got it. What is it? Zoro grimaced. Are we really gonna climb up a mountain? You're still thinking about that. It must be due to the sea currents. Nami stated. If strong currents from each of the four seas were to all head towards that mountain, then they would drive the water up the waterway. Nami nodded her head, slowly standing up. She still had on her long, blue raincoat. And at the very top, the currents will merge and come out to the Grand Line. Since we're already riding the currents, all we have to worry about is properly steering. Reverse Mountain is a winter island, so the currents that hit its edge will travel down to the bottom of the sea. So if we fail to enter the waterway, we'll crash and get dragged down to the bottom of the sea. Got it. So, Luffy stood up with Moshi once again resting on his shoulder. You're saying it's a magic mountain, right? Nami, you're amazing. Sanji gushed, clasping his hands together as a faint pink dusted his cheeks. Never heard of a ship going up a mountain before, Zoro stated, standing up and crossing his arms over his chest. I've heard things about the Grand Line. Sanji smiled, but it was a strange, serene smile. Supposedly, half of the people die trying to go into the Grand Line. Entering it is no easy task. I see the magic mountain. Luffy yelled, pointing forward. What? Usopp gasped. What's that huge shadow? That's the red line. It's so huge, I can't even see the top of it because of the clouds. Looming over the Straw Hats and their boat, Mary, was a mountain that looked a lot like a wall that extended for miles. It was tall, red, and seemed very threatening. And then suddenly the Straw Hat pirates were moving into action. Get a good group of the rudder so we don't get dragged down under. Luffy yelled over the wind and rain. Just leave it to us. Usopp and Sanji replied, both men grabbing hold of the rudder and held on tightly. Amazing, Nami muttered, staring straight ahead. It's the entrance to the waterway. She pointed forward and yes, up ahead was their very slim entrance to the Grand Line. We're veering off course. Turn a little to the right. Luffy called, clutching his straw hat. Right, turn starboard. Usopp called and he and Sanji pulled on the rubber with all their might, which was why seconds later a crack could be heard. The rudder had broken. The Straw Hats stared in shock for a moment, before Nami came to her senses and facepalmed. We're gonna crash, she muttered dryly. Luffy raced past Nami, handing her Moshi as he rushed past. Gomu Gomu no. He hopped off the railing, expanding his body. Balloon. He pressed himself against the wall of the entrance, his body becoming a gigantic balloon. The Mary bounced off his body, and they were saved from crashing into the mountain. They were going up Reverse Mountain. Luffy made his way back to the ship, and everyone looked forward in joy. We did it, Luffy exclaimed, throwing his hands into the air and smiling broadly. Nami threw off her raincoat, revealing her blue shirt with spaghetti straps, and her usual yellow skirt. Sanji wasn't even smoking his usual cigarette, he too was throwing his hands up in glee. Zoro stood beside Nami with a small smirk on his face, and Usopp was hanging onto the mast of the ship. Woohoo! We've reached the top, Nami cried. Indeed they were now out of the storm, and were at the very top of the mountain. Moshi couldn't believe his eyes. Now all we have to do is go down. Luffy grinned. Whoa. As soon as he said that, the ship began to go down the tall mountain easily riding the current. I can see the Grand Line up ahead. Gucha. Boo. Zoro blinked, looking around himself. Did you guys hear something just now? Who cares? Luffy asked, hanging on to the head of the Mary. I wouldn't be surprised if that was just noise from the wind. Nami replied, smiling brightly. She placed a hand onto Moshi's head and giggled. The terrain here is quite odd after all. Boo. What is that? Usopp muttered, putting one of his goggles on and staring at the approaching sea. Nami. Sanji suddenly called. There's a mountain up ahead. A mountain. Nami blinked. That can't be. Once we pass the Twin Capes up ahead, we should reach the open sea. Boo. TTT, that's no mountain. Usopp cried. It's a whale. Luffy yelled in surprise, and yes, appearing in front of the Straw Hats was a giant, dark blue, whale with bruises running over its head. Moshi thought Momu was gigantic, but this whale was something else. What do we do? Zoro yelled. Should we fight him? Are you kidding? Usopp replied. How the heck are we supposed to fight something that big? We're too close to see anything. Sanji called. It looks just like a giant wall. Where are its eyes? Ah, that's right. Nami nodded. Maybe the whale just hasn't noticed us yet. Well, if we don't do anything soon, we are gonna crash. Zoro yelled, before pointing forward. Look, there's an open space up left. Turn portside. But the rudder is broken. Usopp deadpanned. Well, we've gotta do something. Zoro ran towards Usopp. Come on, I'll help too. That's it, I've got a plan. Luffy suddenly shouted. Luffy raced past Nami and into one of the rooms on the Mary. Meanwhile, Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro worked to somehow get the rudder to work. It's no use, Usopp cried. The rudder won't budge. And suddenly a loud "Foosh" could be heard, and Usopp, Nami, Zoro, Sanji, and Moshi stared in shock. A cannon had just been fired, most likely Luffy's doing. The cannon. The four screeched, each of them sharing glances of comical exasperation. The ship crashed into the whale, knocking the head of the Mary off. Nami had to duck in order to avoid being hit. Oh god, she whispered, clutching her heart. I almost died. My special seat. Luffy cried after having made his way onto the deck of the ship. And then suddenly the whale's eye was on the Straw Hat group and their ship. Boo! The whale opened its mouth and screamed, and its scream shook the sea around it. Uru! My ears! Sanji cried, nearly letting go of the large oar he was holding onto. Just row, Usopp replied, as fast as you can. We have got to get away from this thing, now. Luffy stood behind Nami with his fists clenched, and the navigator gave him a weary glance. Luffy, how dare you? He began, putting his hand onto his shoulder. Destroy. He pulled his arm back and shot it forward with anger. My special seat. Luffy's fist connected with the whale's large eye. That idiot. The rest of his crew cried, all of them nearly falling over in shock. Gucha. It sees us. Nami yelled, pointing towards the eye that looked down on the ship. The eye that wasn't bruised because of Luffy. Come at me, you bastard. Luffy yelled, getting into a fighting stance. Just shut the hell up already. Zoro and Usopp cried in unison, both men delivering a kick to Luffy's head. The whale suddenly opened its large mouth, and the current dragged the straw hats into the mouth of the whale. Ah! Nami screamed. Luffy. The straw hat boy had fallen off the ship, and his crewmates were trying their best to get him back. Luffy. Zoro yelled, reaching his hand out. Grab on. But it was too late. The whale had already shut his mouth, leaving a pirate crew without its captain. Gucha. Chapter 24. Meet Crocus and Laboon. What do you make of this? Sanji, Usopp, Nami with Moshi, and Zoro were all standing on the Mary as they approached some type of island. But they were still inside a giant, blue whale, weren't they? What do I make of this? Zoro repeated Sanji's question, crossing his arms over his chest. Yeah, what's your explanation for this? Sanji stated, lighting up his signature cigarette. I could have sworn we were all swallowed by a giant whale, but are we just dreaming or something? Yeah, Usopp nodded. It's got to be a dream. What's with that house on that island then? Zoro tilted his head to the side in confusion. Must be an illusion. And then all of a sudden a giant, purple, squid popped up out of the ocean. It's a squid. Nami and Usopp cried, running away with their hands in the air. But just as soon as it popped up, it fell back down into the ocean. A bunch of long hooks were lodged into it, and the hooks were slowly dragging said giant squid towards the tiny island. Seems like there's a person here. Zoro stated. Let's hope it's a person. Sanji added, taking his cigarette out of his mouth and sighing. By the way, Usopp whimpered. Where did Luffy go? I've had enough. Nami sobbed. I wanna go home. Maybe we should just open fire. Usopp stood up and clenched his fists together. We'll just shoot our way out of this mess. Hang on. Sanji held up his hand. There's someone coming out. An old man stood on the island, with a long rope in his hands. He was pulling the giant squid towards his little island. He had on glasses and feathers. On top of his head. That old man took out that squid in one blow. Nami muttered. Was he just fishing, or was he doing it to save us? Zoro scratched his head in thought. Suddenly the old man caught Sanji's eye and the two were locked into a staring contest. Moshi looked back and forth between the two and deadpanned. Say something. Sanji suddenly shouted, his teeth becoming fanged out comically. The old man sat in a chair and held up a newspaper, crossing his leg over his other leg as he did so. Aye, if it's a fight you want, then you've got one. Usopp stuttered, shaking his fist in a way that only he thought was threatening. We have a cannon on our side. Don't. The old man finally spoke. Or else someone will end up dead. Oh. Sanji spoke with another cigarette between his lips. And just who would end up dead? Me. The old man stated with a serious expression. You. Sanji deadpanned, already exasperated. Now, don't get so worked up. Zoro stated, waving his hand in front of Sanji's face. Hey old man, would you mind telling us just who you are, and just where this place exactly is? That Gramps thinks he can make a fool out of me. Sanji huffed, steam shooting out of his nose. Quote. The old man tsked. It's common courtesy to introduce yourself before asking others questions, ya know. Oh right. Zoro nodded. Sorry about that. My name is Crocus. The old man began. The lighthouse keeper of the Twin Capes. I'm 71 years old, a Gemini, and type AB blood. That's not what we wanted to know. Zoro shouted, his teeth becoming fanged out. You're wondering where this place is. You first trespass in my private resort and then start mouthing off with that attitude. Crocus shook his head and flipped a page in his newspaper. Does this place look like the stomach of a mouse? So then we really were swallowed by a whale. Usopp muttered. What do we do? Nami asked, putting her hands on her cheeks in fright. I don't want to be digested. If there's an exit you want, it's over there. Crocus pointed towards a pair of large, steel doors which were for some reason floating in the sky. There's an exit. The pirates shouted, staring at the doors with wide eyes. And how is it that a door is floating in the sky? Nami questioned, crossing her arms under her small bust. No wait. Usopp peered at the doors. If you look closely, the skies and the clouds and those doors, all of them are just a painting. The inside of the whale's stomach has been painted over. That's just my way of having a good time. Crocus added, still peering at his newspaper. Just what the heck are you doing here anyways? Usopp asked with a deadpan tone. Just leave him be. Zoro put his hand onto Usopp's shoulder. We've found an exit, so let's just get out of here. As soon as those words came out of Zoro's mouth, the seas turned violent and their boat began to harshly sway. What's going on? Usopp cried. So he started again, has he? Crocus muttered, shaking his head. Look, Nami pointed towards the island Crocus was sitting on. That's not an island either. It's a ship, an iron one at that too. So that means that this ocean is actually stomach acid, and if we stay here any longer our shop will be dissolved. Hey, Usopp yelled. What's going on here? Give us an explanation. This whale, Crocus calmly began, crossing his arms over his chest, has begun bashing his head against the red line. What? Sanji and Zoro yelled in unison. Now that he mentions it, Nami put her finger onto her chin and thought. I remember that whale's forehead was covered in scars. And he was bellowing up at the sky. What does it all mean then, Nami? Usopp asked. It means he's suffering, Nami concluded. He must be trying to kill this whale from the inside. Nami glared over at Crocus. What a nasty way to kill something. Usopp stated, giving Crocus a glare of his own. Hey now, the old man deadpanned. Well, if the mystery has been solved let's just leave already. Zoro put his hands onto his hips. We'll be dissolved if we hang around any longer. That's right. Sanji nodded in agreement. I don't have anything against whaling and it's not like we're obliged to save this whale either. So let's just get out of here. Well, if the whale keeps on rampaging like this it'll be hard to even reach the exit. Usopp stated. Well, if we don't hurry, our lives and Luffy's will be in much more danger. Zoro bluntly replied. But Luffy isn't in here with us. Nami said. I saw him escape outside the whale's mouth. Hey, Usopp blinked. The old man just dived into the water. Sanji, Nami, and Zoro's jaws all dropped. Why would he do something like that? He's swimming towards the exit. We should hurry up and make our way to the exit before the whale gets any more violent. Usopp suggested. Arg, we have no choice but to row. Zoro stated, grabbing onto the railing as the whale's acidic sea of a stomach roughly shook the Mary. Gucha, get the oars. Come on, we have to hurry. Sanji called. The exit is right. Woohoo. Guys, you're all right. The group of pirates looked up and each one of them sweat dropped when they saw none other than their captain falling towards the boat from the sky. Luffy. Zoro scratched his head. Well, in any case, he can help out. Luffy, along with two other strange people, crashed into the acidic ocean. The old man's running away. Usopp yelled, pointing his finger in the old man's direction. Crocus had opened the exit door and was seemingly making a getaway. Forget about him, Zoro stated. Saving Luffy comes first. Gucha. The whale seems to have calmed down. Nami breathed a sigh in relief, leaning against the railing next to Moshi. Sitting on the ground next to her feet were individuals who were not a part of their crew, a woman with long, blue hair and a man with orange hair and a golden crown atop his head. Well, who are you guys, exactly? The navigator stood in front of them, crossing her arms under her bust. Luffy was seated on the railing, swinging his feet above them, Sanji was kneeling beside the blue-haired woman looking lovesick, and Zoro and Usopp were just leaning against the railing of the Mary. I won't let you not a single finger on Laboon. Crocus suddenly called, pointing a finger at the pirates. He was still standing on the exit, though he looked to be a bit worn out. For as long as I live. Oh, he's back. Usopp sighed. Who's that old guy? Luffy bluntly asked. Foo. The blue-haired woman smirked, bending her head down. Oh, but we're inside the whale now. The male with orange hair and a crown on his head stated. It'll be only too easy. He and the blue-haired woman suddenly held up long guns and fired 2 shots. To blast a hole in its stomach. We won't let you interfere with our whaling business any longer. Crocus jumped off the exit platform and took the 2 bullets, instead of letting the whale take the hit. That old man took the blast with his own body. Usopp gaped, staring in awe. What? Nami put her hands on her cheeks. So then, he's been protecting the whale this entire time. Cease your futile resistance. The blue-haired lady stood to her feet, still holding up her gun. Just try to protect the whale if you still can. But it won't stop our twin from using this whale as food. Her partner chimed in, he too standing to his feet and putting his gun over his shoulder. Usopp and Nami shared glances of confusion. Why is that old man? What's going on? Luffy stood up then. He took one look at Crocus's face and nodded. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll knock these guys out for you. The rubber male declared. He swung his fists and hit both intruders in the head, effectively knocking them off their feet in an instant, and sending them crashing face first into the deck of the Mary. Gucha. This whale is an island whale, found normally in the West Blue. Crocus began, plopping down in his chair next to a large tree on the island. Moshi was calmly sitting in Crocus's lap, happy that they had made another friend. Luffy was busy trying to climb the tree, while everyone else was on the ground listening to Crocus's story. The blue-haired woman and her orange-haired partner were both knocked out and were tied up. It's the largest species of whale in the world. This one is named Laboon. Crocus glanced down at the 2 tied up villains. And these 2 are rogues from a nearby town. Their goal is to hunt Laboon, because the meat from Laboon can feed their twin for 2 to 3 years. But I won't allow that. Crocus rested his hand on Moshi's little head. As for why Laboon keeps bashing his head against the red line, there's a reason for all of that too. Are you gonna tell us the story? Zoro asked as Luffy slid down the tree and fell onto the swordsman's head. Ah, Crocus sighed. Long ago, while unwashed minding my business as the lighthouse keeper, a certain group of friendly pirates came down Reverse Mountain. And following their ship was a baby whale. That baby whale was Laboon. It seems that Laboon had accompanied their journey from the West Blue, but fearing that the Grand Line was too dangerous they left him behind, or so they thought. Normally island whales are known to swim together in pods, but to Laboon those pirates were his pod. Their ship was damaged when they arrived, so they stayed here for several months to fix it. I became quite good friends with them during their stay. Nami sat down in the grass between Sanji and Usopp, already knowing that this little story wasn't going to have a happy ending. And so, on the day of their departure, Crocus continued, their captain asked me to take care of Laboon for 2 to 3 years. He said, once we've sailed around the world, we'll come back for him no matter what. And understanding their intent, Laboon has been waiting here patiently. Ah, Nami nodded solemnly. So that's why he keeps on bellowing even today, and bashing his head against the red line. That's right, Crocus nodded. It's been over 50 years since then. And he still believes his friends will come back. Gucha, this is some waterway. Sanji muttered. They were back on the Mary and were traveling through a large waterway. Beside their ship, Crocus was traveling with them on his small boat island. I'm amazed you've managed to dig out such a big hole and live inside of here. Is this another one of our ways of having a good time? It's a hobby of mine. Crocus replied. Anyhow, what's with that snail? He pointed at Moshi, who was sitting on the railing beside Luffy. Oh, this is Moshi. Luffy grinned. He's our friend. He's been recording everything that's happened up until now, so that all our friends back home can see for themselves the fun adventures we'll go on. Moshi. Crocus stared at the snail for a second, seemingly seeing some familiarity in him, before shaking his head and looking away. Don't you kids know that the government can easily hack into his camcorder? Yeah, but we'll worry about that if all of us get bounties. Nami replied, shrugging her shoulders. Besides, the only person with a current bounty is Luffy, and he's still considered to be unimportant to the world. Yeah, but I'm still gonna become Pirate King. Luffy stated, sticking out his tongue. Anyhow, don't get the wrong idea. I may not look like much, but I am a real doctor. I even used to run a clinic at the Cape a long time ago. Crocus stated, a doctor, really? Luffy smiled widely, putting his arms on the railing and resting his head on the arms. Join my crew as my doctor. Stop talking nonsense, Crocus replied, stopping his ship beside a metal ladder. He then slowly made his way up the ladder. I'm too old to be doing reckless things with you kids. So you're a doctor, huh? And you live inside a whale? Nami asked tiredly. That's right. The old man began turning a large wheel. With a whale this big, it's impossible to treat it from the outside. Anyhow, I'm opening the gate now. All right, Luffy yelled, throwing his hands up in glee as soon as the Straw Hat group was out of the whale and back into the ocean. We are out. I can see the real sky at last. Moshi looked up at the sky of the Grand Line. He had lived in the East Blue all his life, so he was also new to the wonders of the sky, and the ocean water around him still looked the same. Hey, what are we gonna do about them? Usopp asked, pointing towards a tied-up duo. Just throw them over somewhere around here. Crocus replied. Zoro and Luffy happily kicked the two off the ship, after they untied them of course. The two then fell into the water. So who are you guys again? Luffy curiously asked, glancing down at the two. It's none of your business. The blue-haired woman replied angrily. No wait, Ms. Wednesday. Her partner suddenly stated. Perhaps it is their business. As long as they are pirates, that is. True indeed, Mr. 9. Ms. Wednesday said, before pointing her finger at the pirates. Our organization may have some use of you. Prepare yourselves. The two then swam away, shouting threats at Crocus as they did so. So her name is Ms. Wednesday, huh? Sanji asked, leaning against the railing and smiling dreamily. What a beautiful enigma you are. Are you sure about just letting them go? Nami asked Crocus. They'll be sure to come back for the whale again, you know. Even if I didn't let them go, there will be other rogues who'll come and take their place. Crocus replied. Gucha, to think that it's been waiting for them to come back for him for 50 years, does it still believe its friends will come for it? Usopp asked. They were currently sitting beside the lighthouse, on the bottom of the mountain. Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp sat around the table while Luffy was leaning against one of the rocks. Moshi was sitting in top of the table, while Nami and Crocus chose to remain standing. Those pirates sure are taking a long time. Luffy stated, crossing his arms behind his head. You idiot, this is the Grand Line. Sanji said, lighting up another cigarette. Those pirates are dead. They won't come back no matter how long that whale waits. Why do you have to go and say such a cold thing? Usopp glared at Sanji. You can't say that for sure. They might still come back. Can't you even appreciate such a moving story about a whale who still believes in his friend's promise? The truth if far more cruel. Crocus stated. Those fellows left already, left from the Grand Line that is. I heard it from a reliable source. Wah. Usopp stared at him in shock. Even Moshi was a bit shocked at this bit of information. The snail's teal eyes were wide with shock. So they just left the whale behind. Nami shook her head, but that would mean that they left the Grand Line through the calm belt. Yes, that is why I don't know whether they survived or not. Crocus continued, but even if they did survive, they would never dare to return here ever again. A place where the seasons, climate, currents, and winds could not be any more chaotic. A place where common sense fails to uphold. That place is this sea, the Grand Line, and it rules with fear over the faint-hearted. So basically, those cowards were more concerned about their lives than keeping a promise and thus left the Grand Line to never return again. Sanji let out a puff of smoke from his mouth and shook his head at this piece of information. So they just abandoned this whale, even though this whale never doubted them and has been waiting here for 50 years. Usopp slammed his hands onto the table. How could they be so cruel? If that's the case, then why haven't you tried telling the whale the truth? Nami asked. This whale can understand human words, right? I have, Crocus replied, closing his eyes. I've told him the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But he won't listen. Laboon has been bellowing at Reverse Mountain, and bashing his head against the red line, as if trying to stubbornly assert that his friends are behind the wall. I've tried telling the truth many times since then, but Laboon still refuses to accept the truth. What a whale. Sanji looked up at Laboon, who was currently gazing up at the water flowing down from Reverse Mountain. He still keeps on waiting, even after being betrayed. Even though there's no point in waiting anymore. Usopp added, he too staring up at the large whale. But as much as I feel sorry for this whale and all, you've also been betrayed by them if you think about it. Why don't you just leave the whale behind already? Sanji asked, putting his cigarette back into his mouth. Look at the scars on his head. Crocus said, gazing up at Laboon. If he continues recklessly bashing his head against the wall, he will certainly die. We have an odd relationship, but he's still my companion that I've lived with for over 50 years. I can't just stand by and let him die. Ah, Luffy yelled. Nami's sweat dropped as she and the rest of the crew watched Luffy run by with the mast of the ship and their Jolly Roger in his hands. He quickly began racing up the side of the whale. What's that idiot up to now? Sanji deadpanned. You take your eyes off of him for 1 second. Zoro shook his head. Gomu Gomu. Luffy yelled once he had reached the top. Flower arranging. Now since Laboon is so big and Luffy is all the way at the top of him, they couldn't exactly see what was going on. But the pirates and Crocus knew that Luffy had implanted the mast of the ship into one of Laboon's wounds. Is that a ship mast? Zoro asked. Yeah, I think it's our ship mast. Usopp stated. Yup, it's our main mast alright. Sanji added, shaking his head. Laboon cried out in pain, shaking his head back and forth as blood spurted from the new wound Luffy had given him. What the hell is he doing? Nami, Zoro, Crocus, and Sanji screeched in unison, holding up their hands in shock. He destroyed our ship. Usopp gasped, looking as if he were about to have a heart attack. Oh, he's coming this way. Zoro shouted, and indeed Laboon was making his way towards them in the hopes of getting Luffy off of his head. Nami grabbed Moshi, and she and everyone ran as Laboon bashed his head against the wall. Hey kid, Crocus shouted in shock, trying to go after him in the hopes that Luffy wasn't dead, but Nami grabbed him by his arm. Don't worry about him, he won't die. The navigator shouted. Moshi nodded his head in agreement. There was no way he would die this early on. Luffy was indeed alive. Take this, he shouted, shooting his arm into Laboon's eye much like he did earlier. Laboon cried out in pain once more and threw the rubber mail into the lighthouse. The two glared at each other for a moment before Luffy smirked. I'm tough, aren't I? Luffy asked the whale, to which he replied by staring at him curiously. Our fight has yet to be settled, so we must fight each other again someday. Your old friends may be dead, but I'm your new rival. And once my crew sails around the Grand Line, we'll be sure to come back and see you again. Laboon's eyes welled with tears. He threw his head back and let out a loud cry, though this one wasn't from pain. He was happy now the whale had something to look forward to in the near future. And then, Luffy grinned. We'll duke it out once more. What do you say, Gucha? Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Memories by Keke XP. Chapter 25, Building Bonds with Moshi. Hey, everyone, Usopp asked, after everyone was seated around the table. Everyone except for Luffy, of course. The Straw Hat Captain was sitting on a rock close to Laboon's head, trying to paint some image onto it. Laboon didn't seem to mind, and was instead smiling widely with his eyes closed and content. The whale had decided that he liked Luffy and his strange little crew. What is it, Usopp? Nami asked, putting her cheek into the palm of her hand and wearily glancing at him. The navigator was already tired, and their adventure had yet to begin. Moshi was also already feeling tired. He was, once again, seated in the middle of the table and staring at everyone around him. After we've all reached our goals. I mean, if we reach our goals, what do you guys plan on doing afterwards? The sniper scratched his arm, gazing at each of his friends. Zoro glanced at him in slight surprise. I was expecting you to ask a stupid question. What brought this up? I dunno. The long-nosed male shrugged his shoulders. I'm just bored. Well, I know what I'm gonna do. Sanji stated, I'm going to marry either Nami Swan, or a beautiful mermaid, and we're gonna have children together and live happily ever after. The Love Cook clasped his hands together in glee, his eyes turning to hearts as he gazed up at the sky, lost in his fantasy world. Stupid Love Cook, Zoro commented, which caused said Love Cook to break out of his daydream and glare at him. Well, what are you gonna do? Sanji retorted, crossing his arms and still glaring at the swordsman. How should I know? Zoro shrugged. I'll probably just continue to forever train so that I won't lose my status as the strongest swordsman in the world. That sounds so boring, Zoro. Usopp deadpanned. Is that really all you would do? Yeah, well, what would you do, oh great and powerful Usopp? Zoro retorted, crossing his arms over his chest. Well, I'd most likely return home to tell Kaya and everyone about my adventures, and I'll be bringing my fleet of 8,000 men with me. Usopp stuck his nose up into the air with pride. Maybe you should stop dreaming. Sanji let out a puff of smoke from his cigarette. You're one to talk, ya hypocrite. Usopp deadpanned and muttered in reply. Hey Nami, what about you? Zoro asked, pointing a finger in her direction. What are you gonna do? She tilted her head to the side and thought. I'm probably going to settle down and marry a rich guy and have kids. Usopp suggested. Fall in love with me and live happily ever after. Sanji suggested, his cheeks becoming a rosy red color. Continue being a witch, Zoro asked. Continue stealing money from lousy idiots and live happily ever after with my money and Mykon's. In my world map, the navigator concluded, and Sanji and Usopp fell over comically. So I was right. Zoro nodded his head in content. Continue being a witch. Oi, old man. Luffy ran over to them, his hands and part of his face covered in paint. Got any more yellow paint? Yeah. Crocus nodded his head. Check behind the lighthouse, in one of the boxes. Hey Luffy, what about you? Usopp and the rest of the pirates, including Moshi, stared at Luffy curiously. What are you gonna do once you obtain the One Piece and become Pirate King? Luffy blinked, looking a bit taken aback by the question, but then he chuckled softly. Isn't it obvious? No, it's really not, his crewmates stated in a deadpan tone. Well, it should be obvious. Shishishi. He smiled widely, gums and all. We're gonna go on even more adventures, and face even newer challenges. Our adventure is never ending. And Moshi will be with us to record everything. Said Snail smiled happily and bobbed his head. He couldn't help but feel happy whenever any of his friends were happy. Hey, that makes sense. Zoro nodded. And also, we'd buy all the meat in the world. The Straw Hat Captain's mouth watered at the very thought of having all the meat in the world to himself. Like hell we will, his crewmates shouted. Crocus snorted, resting his elbows onto the table. You kids sure are something else. You remind me of another group of people. Gucha, let's sing the Straw Hat song. Usopp stated, picking up Moshi and grinning widely. He placed the snail onto his shoulder and began marching around. There's a group of pirates, who sail the wild seas. They eat lots of tasty meals, cooked by their cook Sanji. He pointed at Sanji, who was cutting up the large fish that he had obtained from Loungetown. Sanji didn't reply, but instead smiled a small smile as he continued to chop up and cook for his friends. They have a trusty swordsman, he goes by Roro Zoro. Usopp pointed at Zoro, who was knocked out by one of the rocks close to Laboon. He had a bubble protruding from his nose as well. Usopp shook his head. He's also a bit of a moron. They have a sniper no one can top, he's the powerful Captain Usopp. Usopp pointed at himself and smiled cheekily, flicking his nose. Pirates tremble under my might, I barely have to put up a fight. That's a lie, Sanji stated, walking past Usopp with a large pot in his hands. Moving on, Usopp stuck his tongue out at Sanji's back. The next one's as pretty as Aphrodite, her lovely name is Nami. He pointed at Nami, who was sitting beside Crocus and was examining something on the table. When she heard her name she looked up and grinned. Don't forget that I like money and Mykon's, she said. Usopp, add that in your song. No, the sniper deadpanned before marching away. And finally our captain, he's very goofy, he loves to eat meat, his name is Luffy. Luffy grinned at the camcorder, sitting atop Laboon's head covered in paint. He was still trying to paint something onto Laboon. Oi, Laboon, say hi to Shanks and everyone. The whale opened its mouth just a bit and wailed loudly, though it was a happy wail. Luffy laughed, but stopped when he felt the shoes of Nami, Zoro, and Sanji hit him in the face along with them shouting, be quiet. Honestly, you're so noisy. Nami deadpanned, shaking her head. Usopp placed Moshi back down onto the table and grinned. And there's also Moshi, he concluded, before reaching over and turning off the camcorder. Gucha. Zoro smirked, holding up Moshi and giving the camcorder a wink. He turned so that Moshi could get a good look at Nami. The female was leaning back in her chair asleep, but the chair was standing on only 2 legs. She had her own legs crossed and placed on top of the table and her arms were crossed behind her head. This is round 2, Zoro told the camcorder, putting his fingers to his lips in a hush motion. He slowly crept towards her, knowing that she was a light sleeper but also knowing that her senses weren't as good as his. He took a deep breath before bellowing, there's treasure behind the lighthouse. Lots and lots of gold. Nami, there's treasure. The female was snapped awake in an instant, but in her scramble to get up her chair fell, overtaking her with it. She rubbed her head, pushing the chair off of her before glaring at Zoro. Her fists clenched and red flames seemed to flicker around her comically. Zoro, she growled. Zoro took off running with the navigator behind him, hot on his trail. Damn, she runs fast, but no regrets. Zoro smirked at Moshi once more before turning off the camcorder. Gucha. Red hair. Luffy zoomed in on Nami's red hair, only to receive a smack to the head. Green hair. Luffy zoomed in on Zoro's unique green hair and the swordsman continued to snore away, a large bubble being protruded from his left nostril. Blonde hair. Luffy zoomed in on Sanji's blonde locks of hair, only to be kicked out because the male was cooking and didn't want to be bothered while he was cooking. Curly hair. Luffy zoomed in on Usopp's curly black locks. The sniper was boredly watching Sanji cook, so he didn't really mind when his captain zoomed in on his curly hair. And black hair. Luffy pointed Moshi at himself and laughed loudly. What a strange pirate crew we are. You're the strangest one of all. Sanji and Usopp stated in unison, waving one hand to the side. Gucha. Hey, I wonder if Moshi can take pictures. Luffy muttered, curiously staring at the small snail. He had washed up, well Sanji had forced him to, and was currently taking a break from painting Laboon's head. He tilted his head to the side in thought, opening up Moshi's shell and gazing at two buttons. Usually, the crew clicked on the blue button when they were recording anything and left the green button alone. But Luffy was very curious and he, being the usual dorky Luffy, pushed the green button. Instantly a flash of white light could be seen, and from his mouth Moshi produced a picture of Luffy, one of him with a curious look on his face. The Straw Hat Captain took the paper and grinned. Wow, you're amazing Moshi. You really can take pictures. Moshi already knew that he could take pictures, but didn't know how to tell that to the Straw Hat Boys since none of them could understand him anyway. And so Luffy stood there, taking pictures of himself while making very goofy faces until Usopp and Zoro walked over towards him. What are you doing, Luffy? Zoro asked, tilting his head to the side. Moshi can take pictures, so I've been trying to take as many as I can. He replied, putting his hands into his mouth and stretching his rubber gums. Let us get in there. Usopp stated, standing beside Luffy in an instant. Zoro stood on his left, giving the camera a smirk with his eyes closed while Usopp stood to his right and had his long nose in the air proudly. And Luffy was just smiling widely. The three continued to make funny faces at the camera, before a certain red-haired female appeared from out of nowhere and pushed all three of them aside. She gave the camera a big, pretty smile. You guys are the worst. Taking photos without me, I'm actually hurt, the navigator complained, crossing her arms and pouting much like Luffy when Sanji tells him he can't have any more meat. I should make you pay me money just for that. Which, Zoro muttered, and only he and Moshi could hear it, because Nami was scary and Zoro didn't feel like suffering from another beating. Nami. Luffy put his arm around her shoulder. Okay, let's take photos together. Nami stuck out her tongue playfully at Moshi, while Zoro crossed his eyes and held up two fingers. Luffy pulled at his mouth, while Usopp crossed his eyes and stuck out his tongue. They continued to take silly pictures together, until a certain cook entered the picture. Hey, Sanji frowned, getting rid of one of his cigarettes. You guys are having fun without me. How rude, I thought we were supposed to be friends. Zoro snorted. Love cook. What did you say, Marimo? Sanji replied, glaring at him. The two men pressed their faces against each other's and growled, not realizing that Usopp, Nami, and Luffy had gotten behind Moshi. Say cheese. Nami stated cheerfully. Both men blinked as a bright white light hit their faces. Nami, Usopp, and Luffy were laughing as a picture of the men looking at the camera with stupid faces protruded from Moshi's mouth. Hey, delete that. I don't want my face to be seen in case the Marines want to hack into Moshi's camcorder. Sanji hastily stated. Don't worry Sanji, we know you're camera shy so we'll just delete it after we're done. Luffy stated, grinned widely. Hey, alright. Sanji shrugged and shook his head. With that being said, Luffy stood in front of Moshi. Group photo. Luffy stood in the middle of the group, smiling widely. Nami stood to his right, sticking out her tongue and holding up two fingers while winking. Sanji stood beside her, signature cigarette in his mouth and grinning. Zoro stood to Luffy's left, giving Moshi a normal smirk. And Usopp stood beside Zoro, giving Moshi a regular smile with one finger on his nose. The crew continued taking pictures, both silly and serious, until Usopp suddenly said, why don't we include Laboon and even Crocus in one of our pictures? Great idea, Usopp. Luffy nodded, before turning around and shouting, hey, old man, Laboon, come here. What is it? Crocus warily asked, approaching the Straw Hats with his arms crossed. Where's Laboon? Nami wondered aloud, noticing that the whale was missing. Take a picture with us. Come on, please. Luffy gave him the puppy dog eyes. Makino could never say no to his puppy dog eyes, so Crocus couldn't be any different, right? Crazy kids. Crocus shook his head, and held back a smirk. He had a little suspicion about where Laboon was. Let's take it close to the sea. And so the Straw Hats and Crocus stood on the rocks, right next to the sea, each with different poses. Luffy was in the middle, of course, his arms crossed over his chest and grinning. Zoro and Sanji were on his left, glaring at each other. Nami was on his right, her arms behind her back and smiling happily. Usopp was beside her, a hand on his hip and a finger pointing at his chest with a smirk on his face. Crocus stood beside Usopp, looking bored. Ready, Moshi? Everyone. Luffy grinned. 1. The water began to slosh around a bit wildly behind them. 2. The water grew even more wild, but no one paid it any mind. 3. Moshi was able to click the button himself, but the problem was what happened next. Laboon had sprung up from out of the ocean, shooting water everywhere, including onto the pirates and Crocus. Luffy laughed at the water being thrown around him, even though he was a devil fruit user and just might drown, while Zoro and Sanji seemed to be choking each other while slipping around in the water being rained down upon them comically. Nami was covering her head with her arms and was looking down, while Usopp was on his back with his nose in the air spitting out water. And then there was Crocus, who had somehow managed to get onto Laboon's head and was laughing at the pirates. Gucha. Chapter 26, The Log Pose, Mr. 9, and Miss Wednesday. I'm finally finished. This will be a sign of our promise to fight again. Luffy yelled, holding up a large paintbrush and smiling up at Laboon. The whale had the Straw Hat Jolly Roger on its head, though it didn't exactly look comparable to any amazing works of art. Alright then. Nami smiled at her captain, before turning to the work in front of her. Moshi sat on the table beside her, once more. Time to chart out our navigation route. Ah, she suddenly screamed. What are you so noisy about? Luffy asked, turning around to glance at her. What's the matter, Nami Swan? Sanji called, walking towards with many plates of food in his hands on his head. If it's about the meal, then it's all ready and waiting for you to eat it up. Ah, Usopp groaned, climbing up the rocks. I will take a brief break from ship repairs and eat. Please note that our brave swordsman was heroically snoring somewhere on the deck of the Mary. The compass, she stated, pointing at it. It's broken. It's pointing all over the place. Moshi gazed down at her compass, and sure enough it was pointing in random directions. It was their only compass, and if it really was broken then there was no way they could navigate the Grand Line, they'd all die trying. Luffy and Usopp sat on the chairs around Nami, while Sanji placed the food onto the table. Crocus walked over to the group and glanced at the compass. It appears you lot have come here without knowing anything. I'm actually a bit stunned. Did you come here to just throw your lives away? Ah, time for food. Luffy grinned, already tasting the delicious meat. In your case, it's time for feeding. Sanji replied, setting some food down in front of Usopp. I've said it before, that common sense fails to uphold in this ocean. Crocus continued. That compass isn't broken, so it's the magnetic fields, right? Nami asked. Yes, and it's due to many islands here being rich with various materials. Not only that, but the currents and the winds here are as unpredictable as can be. As a navigator you should well understand how terrifying that can be. Yeah, she nodded slowly. I had no idea. Usopp's eyes practically shot out of their sockets. Isn't that like really bad? Are we even going to be alright? Nami is so cute when she's clueless about things. Sanji stated, his eyes turning to hearts. This fish is delicious. Luffy stated, opening his mouth and clamping it down on the fish. You two just quiet down. Nami yelled, raising a threatening fist at the two men and completely ignoring Luffy. To navigate through the Grand Line you'll need a log pose. It's a special type of compass that records the magnetic fields. Crocus said. So it's a weird-looking compass? Luffy asked with a mouth full of elephant trout trunk. Well, it is rather oddly shaped. So then this. The captain held up a brown wristband with a blue sphere on it. Yes, that's it. Crocus nodded. Why the heck do you have one? Nami yelled, punching him in his cheek. Those two weirdos from earlier accidentally left it on our ship. Luffy replied, rubbing the spot Nami punched him in. Why'd you hit me? Just felt I had to. She replied. Oh okay. He nodded and continued to eat his food. Oi, that was quick. Usopp and Sanji stated, waving a hand. So this is a log pose. Nami held in front of her face in fascination. There's no marking on it or anything. The various islands across the Grand Line all have their own magnetic fields surrounding them. Crocus explained. So in short, you'll have to record the magnetic field interaction between any two islands before you can progress to the next island. In this ocean the log pose represents the only reliable way for one to find his way. From this mountain, you'll choose one of the 7 magnetic fields to record which will lead you to different islands. But no matter which path you start with, the paths will all converge into eventually one. What island is that? Sanji asked, putting some food into his mouth instead of smoking his usual cigarette. Raftel, the final stop in the Grand Line. The only ones who have confirmed its existence is the Pirate King and his crew. It is an island of legends. Then does that mean that the One Piece is on that island? Usopp asked, nearly dropping his drink. Who knows? Crocus sighed and crossed his arms over his chest. Although that is the most likely theory, no one has ever reached that island to confirm it. No need to think. Luffy smiled widely, chewing the few pieces of meat off a bone. We can see for ourselves once we're there. Gucha. Ah, should we get going now? Luffy leaned back and patted his large stomach. I'm finished eating. Did you just eat everything by yourself? Sanji yelled, his teeth becoming fanged out comically. Even the bones are gone. Usopp gaped at the empty plates, his eyes nearly shooting out of their sockets. Alright, log pose, Nami said, ignoring her friends. I'll make sure to take good care of you. The fate of our journey is all up to you after all. Why you buttercrap head? Sanji stood up, steam shooting from his nose. That food was. He swung his leg, sharply hitting Luffy. Quote. For Nami to enjoy, Luffy flew past the group and landed face first onto the ground. Crocus snorted at the scene, while Usopp still couldn't get over the fact that Luffy had eaten even the bones. And then there was Nami. She gazed at the now broken log pose before slowly standing up. You too. She swung her leg, hitting both Luffy and Sanji and sending them soaring over the cliff. Can just go cool your heads down in the sea. Usopp stood up as well and looked at the now broken log pose. Wasn't this like super important? What do we do now? Crocus, what do we do? The navigator glanced at the old man. Our precious log pose. Don't worry. I'll give you one as a sign of thanks for the Laboon matter. Gucha. Whiskey Peak. What's that? It's the name of our town. So you want us to take you there because you lost your ship? Luffy was sitting in the middle of the table with Moshi in his lap. Usopp stood to his left while Sanji stood to his right. The two idiots from before Mr. Nine and Ms. Wednesday were kneeling before them on their hands and knees with their heads touching the ground. Nami was on her knees as well, giving them both suspicious looks. Don't you think that's asking a bit too much, Mr. Nine? The navigator asked, still glaring at him. Especially considering the fact that you tried to kill the whale and all. And just who are you guys anyway? Usopp added, crossing his arms and trying to give them a suspicious look though failing, horribly. I'm a king, Mr. Nine declared, only to have Nami pull at his cheek and deadpan. Liar. We cannot stay, Ms. Wednesday stated, bowing her head once more. Please take us back to our town and we swear that we will return the favor. Mr. Nine added, he too bowing his head once again. We'd really rather not keep anything hush-hush, but mystery is our organization's motto. Ms. Wednesday continued, and so we absolutely cannot tell you anything more. Please help us from the kindness of your hearts. Don't listen to them. Crocus rolled his eyes. They're nothing but trouble. We accidentally broke our log pose. Nami said, standing to her feet and showing them the broken Grand Line compass with a sheepish smile. But do you still want a ride? What? The two yelled, standing to their feet and slapping the air. You broke it, and isn't that ours? How dare you try to take advantage of our misfortune when you're just as misfortunate as we are? Oh right. Nami put her finger onto her chin and thought. Crocus here is gonna give us another log pose, did I forget to mention that? She gave them an innocent smile, a smile usually reserved for her crewmates when she was about to let all hell loose. We beseech your kindness, ma'am. Mr. Nine and Ms. Wednesday got back down onto their hands and knees and bowed. Damn this woman, she was toying with us. Okay. Luffy nodded his head, they can come along if they want. You said your home was called Whiskey Peak. Let's go there. Are you crazy? Usopp gaped at his captain. It's obvious that these two are some pretty shady characters. Why would we take them anywhere? It's fine. Luffy waved his hand. Don't sweat the small stuff. We'll be alright. Now, it's time to get going. Gucha. Alright, your log should be recorded by now. Crocus stated. Is it properly pointing towards a place indicated on the map? Ah, yep. Nami nodded after giving both the log pose and the map a quick glance. It's pointing towards Whiskey Peak. The navigator then stepped aboard the ship with some help from Luffy and Usopp. Nami placed Moshi onto the railing beside her captain and grinned. You sure about this, kid? Crocus asked, standing beside the Mary with his arms, as usual, crossed over his chest. Picking Whiskey Peak all just because of these ruffians, the only place you can choose which route to take is here, ya know. It's fine. If I don't like the route, I could always sail once around and choose a different route. Trust the man who's well on his way to becoming the Pirate King. Luffy simply replied. Quote. I see. Crocus nodded, giving them a rare smile. Well then, buy flour Gramps. Luffy called. Thanks for the log pose. Nami added. See ya then. Moshi, take care of your strange captain. Crocus chuckled, giving the snail a thumbs up. As the Straw Hat Pirates were sailing away, Laboon flew up and let out a loud cry. We're going now, whale. Luffy yelled. We'll be back, so wait for us. We're going on the adventure now. Goodbye. See ya soon. Gucha. Do you feel it, Mr. Zero? The sound of something bashing its head against a wall, along with the sound of glass clinking and feet tapping impatiently could be heard throughout the entire room. The only two humans occupying the room weren't very talkative anyway. Feel what, Ms. All Sunday? More sounds of something bashing its head against a wall could be heard, but neither of the humans in the room played the noise any mind. Maybe it's just my imagination. Miss All Sunday chuckled lightly. Never mind then, I suppose it's just me. Chapter 27, Journey to Whiskey Peak. Luffy, you need to save some food instead of eating it all. We're already low on meat. The navigator sighed, placing her hand onto her hip and shaking her head. But Nami, Luffy whined, giving her his best puppy dog eyes because Makino was never able to resist his puppy dog eyes. But it didn't work on the lovely navigator. Everyone was gathered around the table, and were resting a bit having just left the Twin Capes. Luffy, Usopp, and Zoro sat on one side of the table while Miss Wednesday, Mr. Nine, and Sanji sat on the other side. Nami was standing in the middle, with Moshi sitting on the table close to her. What can we expect? I mean, he is a bottomless pit. Sanji stated, lighting up another cigarette. Though I'm gonna have to buy a lock and put it on the fridge so that he won't have any late night snacks. Hey now, you can eat however much when we're gone, but while we're here you're gonna have to share with us. Mr. Nine stated, giving Luffy a pointed glare. Share? Luffy asked, picking his nose with his pinky. Does he even know the meaning of sharing? Usopp muttered, sweat dropping at his captain. Yes, you'll have to share your meat with us while we are here. Mr. Nine stated, crossing his arms over his chest. Steam seemingly shot out of Luffy's nose and he glared at Mr. Nine. I'm not gonna share my meat with you, you tomato head. Tomato head. Mr. Nine huffed, touching his hair with his hand and sticking his nose into the air. What a brat. HMPH, throwing insults out now. Miss Wednesday smirked. Then I guess you could be known as a monkey. How unoriginal. Usopp stated. Then you're a peacock. Luffy replied, pointing a finger at the blue-haired woman. A peacock. She pouted, crossing her arms under her bust and silently counting to 10 to control her anger. Oi Luffy. Don't mock the beautiful lady. Sanji yelled, his teeth becoming fanged out comically. She doesn't deserve to be called any kind of animal. And you're a duck, Sanji. Luffy simply stated, pointing a finger at the blonde. His statement caused Zoro to burst into laughter and for Sanji to stand up with clenched fists. Steam was now shooting from the blonde's nose. Shut up, why are you laughing? You're a. Sanji tried to think of something smart to call the green-haired swordsman. A Marimo. Luffy nodded as if he had just solved the answer to a tricky question. Sanji burst into laughter while Zoro glared at both Luffy and Sanji. Oi, shut your traps. Damn love cook. Sanji quickly got into his face. What did you call me, Marimo? You heard me, ya damn duck. Zoro growled in response, pushing his face against Sanji's in anger. Usopp, you're a snail because, let's be honest here, you're a bit slow when it comes to some things. Luffy continued to speak, looking at Usopp with such a serious expression. How am I the slow one? Usopp cried, slapping the air. And Nami, don't even think about calling me some animal or food. The navigator spoke before he did, putting one hand onto her hip and holding the other hand up. Isn't it obvious what she is? She's a witch, Zoro stated, pointing at the navigator. Any fool could figure that out. Both Nami and Sanji cried, and before you knew it the three were caught up in a heated argument mostly consisting of, damn love cook, Marimo head, and, I should make you pay me money. Mr. Nine was sitting in the corner, running his fingers through his hair and whining about how he was a king and how he didn't deserve this kind of treatment. Usopp had grabbed Luffy by his shoulders and was shaking him, trying to figure out why he was the slow one, though the rubber captain didn't seem to care and was lost in his own little world filled with meat. Miss Wednesday was watching it all and, despite herself being called a peacock, she was smiling just a little. She looked at Moshi and shook her head. What a strange group of pirates. She muttered, before reaching over and turning off the camcorder. Gucha. There. All done. Luffy smiled, with Moshi sitting on his shoulder, gazing up at his artwork. It's Mr. Snow Barrel, he happily stated. Snow was falling from the sky and a large amount of it had indeed fallen onto the Mary. Some of it was sitting in a pile on Luffy's precious straw hat. Luffy had taken advantage of this by building a snowman. It at least cured his boredom. The snowman he had built was a regular snowman, just with a barrel on his head, a green cape, and logs for arms. Ha ha ha, you amateur. You call that pathetic blob a snowman? Usopp smirked and pointed towards his creation. Behold, a soulful inspired work of art. The Snow Queen. He pointed to his snowman, or rather snow woman, and it was a woman in a dress seated on some type of throne with her legs crossed and one hand resting on the back of her neck. Whoa, nice. Luffy grinned. But can your lady do this? Luffy pushed the log on his snowman and it shot forward, hitting the Snow Queen in the face and ultimately knocking off her head. Usopp stood there for a moment with his hands on his hips and smiling before tick marks appeared on his head. Just what the hell do you think you're doing? Usopp shouted, kicking Luffy's snowman in the face and knocking the barrel off of it. Hey, you big bully. Luffy growled before jumping up and kicking Usopp in the face. Moshi was tossed onto the snowy railing, shuddering a bit as he landed on the cold snow. He and Nami watched as the two men went at it. One moment Usopp was throwing tons of snowballs at Luffy, and the next Luffy was rolling a huge snowball towards Usopp, all the while yelling idiotic insults at each other. How they can be so freaking energetic in the freezing cold is beyond me. Nami stated, wiping away the snow that surrounded Moshi with her gloved hands. She watched them for a moment longer before picking Moshi up and walking into the kitchen. Nami Swan, Sanji called, giving her a sweet smile as his eye turned into a heart. Shall I shovel some more snow for you? Just keep going until it's all gone, thanks for your hard work. She called in reply, smiling as she entered the kitchen. Why thank you? Sanji nearly swooned. My pleasure. Excuse me. Mr. Nine glared at her as she entered the kitchen. Does this ship have a heater? This kind of living style is inhumane. I'm cold, Miss Wednesday added, holding her nose into the air. Both of them had blankets wrapped around them and were shivering greatly while Nami was wearing a coat. Shut your mouths. Nami yelled, her teeth becoming fanged out comically. You are not guests here. You wanna warm up? Go shovel some snow or something. Suddenly a thunderclap could be heard, causing Nami to look out the window and look up at the sky in confusion. Lightning. First snow and now lightning. What is going on with this crazy weather? I've never seen anything like it. One minute it's a cloudless sky, the next it's a blizzard. It's like the normal rules of nature don't apply. Just as Crocus warned us. So what do you think? Miss Wednesday gave the navigator a mean smirk. You ready to turn back yet? You and your friends have no idea of how to survive this place. Mr. Nine added, I noticed you haven't steered for a while. Is that wise? Miss Wednesday continued, putting her cheek into the palm of her hand. I know where we're heading, I just checked it a while ago. Nami replied, walking out of the kitchen and placing Moshi onto her shoulder as she did so. As soon as she was outside, she let out an ear-piercing shriek. What's wrong? Usopp called. Sounds bad, Luffy muttered. Don't be afraid, I'll save you. Sanji yelled, clasping his hands together and smiling goofily. Make a hard turn, 180 degrees hurry. Nami yelled. A 180. Usopp looked at her dumbfounded. Why would you want us to turn back? The ship is turned around. We're sailing in the wrong direction. Nami replied, looking down at the log pose on her wrist. I only took my eyes off the log pose for a second. I thought the waves were calm. You aren't a very good navigator, are you? Miss Wednesday asked. You shut up. Nami shouted in reply, slapping the air. You can't trust anything here. Not the winds, waves, clouds. Nothing is as it seems in the sea. The only way to get reliable direction on the Grand Line is with the log pose. Everyone knows that. Miss Wednesday continued to talk, rolling her eyes. Nami kicked both Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine in their backs, sending them flying into the wall. Both of you cut the craps and start doing something useful around here. Nami then went back outside and called out directions, pointing her finger to and fro as she did so. The boys were doing everything she said and were trying their best to keep up with her orders. Meanwhile, Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine were shoveling the snow with deadpan looks. This girl is crazy. Mr. Nine sourly muttered to himself. Hey Nami, it looks like the wind has changed. Usopp called, pointing up at the sky. The clouds were clearing away, showing the sun. But it came with severely strong winds. Hey, wake the hell up snowman, we're in a crisis. Usopp yelled with his teeth becoming fanged out comically. Zoro was lazily lounged in his usual spot with his arms behind his head and snow covering most of his body, though he didn't show signs of waking up anytime soon and continued to snore away. Hey, I think I just saw a dolphin jump. Let's follow it, Luffy stated. No, Nami yelled, tick marks appearing all over her forehead as she took off her coat, exposing her yellow skirt and her pink and black shirt. A fog is rolling in. Sanji yelled, and pretty soon a thick fog covered the entire ship. It made it hard for even Moshi to see anything. This is crazy, Nami screamed. What's going on? Please note that our brave swordsman, Roronoa Zoro, was, quite bravely, snoring away. Gucha. Moments later, Sanji and Usopp lay passed out on one side of the ship's mast while Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine were passed out on the other side. Moshi was just sitting there, trying to nudge them awake when he felt Zoro pick him up. Come on now guys, Zoro began. I know the weather is nice and all, but that's no reason to be so lazy. He then turned to Nami, who was laying on the ground against the white railing. We better be on the right track is all I can say. Shut up, you bastard. Sanji, Nami, and Usopp inwardly thought. So what were your names again? Zoro bent down in front of the two non-pirates aboard the ship. They were very awake now. I don't think you can be trusted. Well, my name is Mr. Nine. Mr. Nine shakily replied, leaning away from the sadistic-looking swordsman. And I'm called Miss Wednesday. Miss Wednesday added, she too trying to scurry away from the frightening swordsman. Right, Zoro smirked. You know those names sound familiar and that's what's bothering me. In fact, the more I think about it the more I'm certain I've heard them somewhere before. The two began sweating nervously, their lips quivering and their bodies shaking because what if he was able to figure out who they really were? Or maybe I haven ga. Zoro cried out in pain as he felt a fist connect with his head. Above him stood Nami, a red aura radiating from her in waves. You jerk, she growled. You think you can just sleep while we do all the damn work? You're lucky that we didn't toss your lazy ass overboard. Zoro glared at her, a green aura radiating from him as well, and the two continued to glare at each other until flashes of white light appeared and Nami stood over Zoro, who was now nursing 2 huge bumps on his head. She walked past him and stood in the middle of the boat. Listen up everyone. There's no way to know what's gonna happen next. During the terror most of us just experienced, I came to the understanding of why this sea was named the Grand Line. My navigation skills are useless here, anything could happen, but mark my words, I will guide us through. She stood with a determined expression. Okay, you sure about that, Nami? Usopp deadpanned. Without a doubt. She nodded. We're gonna be fine, just wait and see. Speaking of which, we're here. The boys, along with Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine, stood up and looked at the seas ahead of them. Moshi was still resting on Zoro's shoulders. Our first journey on the Grand Line comes to an end. It's an island. Luffy grinned and scrambled onto his special seat to get a better view of it. Gucha. Those cactus are huge, Luffy stated gleefully. Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine hopped onto the railing of the ship and gave the pirate crew a smirk. Moshi sat safely on Sanji's shoulder. Thank you all for the ride, really, but we must be leaving. Mr. Nine stated. It's been an interesting ride to say the least. So perhaps we'll meet again someday. Miss Wednesday added. Bye-bye, baby, they stated in unison before hopping off the railing and into the water, where they then swam away. That was a quick exit. Nami said. Yeah, I guess we will never know just what those 2 nut jobs are up to. Usopp deadpanned. Hey, there's a waterway up ahead. I suppose we can just take Mary up the stream. Nami nodded her head. Hey, we should all be on the lookout. With this thin fog and the fact that we are in the Grand Line, there could be monsters up ahead. Sanji said, holding his cigarette between 2 fingers. No problem. If we find monsters we can just leave. Luffy stated. We can't, Luffy. We have to stay on this island long enough for the log post to record the island's magnetic field, according to Crocus. His navigator stated, pointing at the blue log pose. Let's not think about the monsters until we encounter them. They aren't even here yet. Luffy shrugged. Alright everyone. Be ready to fight and run at the same time. Zoro stated as Usopp began rambling about how he had some island disease and if they had heard of it and the usual Usopp stuff. Gucha. Something is moving over there. Luffy loudly stated. Who are they? Sanji muttered, peering at the figures standing on the rocks in the thick fog. Now be on your guard everyone. Nami said, holding Moshi in her arms. Usopp stood behind her with his slingshot drawn and ready for action. All were on guard, waiting for something bad to happen. And then all of a sudden the mist cleared in. Welcome to Whiskey Peak. Gucha. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Memories by Keke XP. The end.